Medical staff reveal the shocking cases that patients tried to walk off. I had a guy go into cardiac arrest in our station. He was promptly lit up and came back around soon after. He just wanted to leave, and we told him that was a bad idea. It wasn't a long argument, as he kept going into arrest. Alright, it's less dramatic than some of these, but a patient I knew refused consolidation, like the follow-up chemotherapy designed to kill lingering cancerous cells and maintain remission. Basically, he stopped his chemo in favor of some holistic treatment that I don't know the details of. Unfortunately, he died within the year. Since it's getting mentioned a lot, yes, this is also what happened to Steve Jobs. And no, he was not my patient. This gentleman had a different sort of cancer to Jobs, but the alternative treatment was just as effective. My dad did 9 of his 12 chemo treatments and quit recently because injecting mistletoe into his gut is what he actually believes will cure him. Stage 3 colon cancer, and he actually believes that modern medicine is a giant government conspiracy. I don't know what upsets me more, that he's got cancer or that he actually believes this crap. Bullet in the head. As long as the bullet misses the brain, you can walk away from some surprisingly gruesome injuries. Unfortunately, it can put you in a state of shock that leaves you resistant to anyone trying to help you. I'm a nurse in aged care. Gangrene from the knee to the ankle all the way to the bone. She had the chance to amputate a year or two before coming into residential aged care, but she apparently said no. She wanted to die. She was only in her early 80s, sound of mind and no other medical issues. So instead of living for another 10 years, she died in horrendous pain, getting her dressings changed every other day, and doped up to her eyeballs on morphine, unable to have any meaningful conversations with her devoted family and friends who came in every day. I'm quite a young nurse, and it was the first time I'd seen gangrene in person. The seeing part was fine, but the smell, oh my frickin' god, the smell. You'd change the dressings in the shower after another hit of morphine, and it would stay on you and your clothes all day. It's like wet old Band-Aids times 100, and like when you leave herbs in the back of the fridge too long and they turn to liquid. It's been 4 months since she passed, and the room she was in still has the smell of rotting flesh. You'd be surprised at how many people refuse treatment for crushing chest pains. The only real thing you can do is wait for them to collapse and then treat. Unconscious people equals implied consent for treatment. And that, viewers, is the only thing you can imply consent for in that state, just in case anyone was wondering, apart from maybe taking their shoes off and putting them on the couch until they wake up. A kid I knew in high school had cancer. His family didn't believe in modern medicine. They belonged to some sort of weird religious group. He instead went to the chiropractor and was treated naturally. Let's just say I don't know this kid anymore. I'm a medical student and we had a panel discussion with some law students. The case was about a 15-year-old girl with an easily treatable form of lymphoma. The kid doesn't want treatment because her hair will fall out, and the mum is okay with that. No treatment. Yeah, the kid didn't make it. The law students were arguing that it was her right to refuse. The medical students were arguing that, F your rights, it's a kid's life. One of the law students, for some reason, decided to say, if my 10-year-old refused treatment, I'd respect their decision. I immediately responded by saying, then you're a crappy parent. And that was how the medical students and law students grew to hate each other. I was the Franz Ferdinand assassination of a postgraduate Cold War. EMT story from 2010. Haven't worked the Band-Aid box for years, but this one stuck with me. Had a guy one time who had had a stroke the year before but hadn't taken his meds after his discharge. He was rocking a 250/170 BP. That is not a typo. We had a second unit come by to double check. We tried for 20 minutes to convince him, along with his daughter, but he was convinced he was just fine. The kicker was that he lived literally 2 blocks from the hospital. I can't imagine he lasted much longer, but I never found out any more. I'm an ED tech. Absolutely massive diabetic man comes into the ED with his leg wrapped in a plastic garbage bag. Paramedics said he had refused to remove the bag. They didn't need to tell us something was clearly horribly wrong, as the stench from this man was horrific even in a well-ventilated area. A nurse finally threatened and cajoled him into removing the bag, and his entire lower leg is a horrific mess of gangrenous flesh. The foot had actually turned black. I was only 2 months into working in the ED, and this was the first time an injury actually turned my stomach. The smell permeated everything. I can't imagine what the other patients were experiencing. He was informed that the limb needed to be amputated or it could lead to sepsis, I believe. He was in total denial, insisted that he was fine. He refused treatment and left the emergency department against medical advice. No idea what happened to him, but he did ask for his trash bag back. I had a patient that was elderly but in her right mind. She came into the hospital via ambulance with no family still lying on the sheets we sent her home with the last time. She had terrible pressure ulcers and was covered in number 2. Came to find out she was the mother of a wealthy dentist in the area and actually lived with him. He was neglecting her horribly. A referral was made to a long-term care facility and social services was notified, but because she was in her right mind, she chose to return home to those terrible conditions. I've had to talk way too many people into getting treatment for their heart attack. Like, why did you call 911 for chest pain or go into the ER only to refuse treatment? Looking at my dad, who's had 2 heart attacks, very minor, he's fine now. The moment you start getting treated for something, the gravity of the situation sets in and you're forced to admit there's something wrong. Going to the doctor is easy because there's still hope that you're fine and it's all in your head or something. Once the doctor confirms your fears, you have to face it. Except when you refuse treatment, then you can keep running away from it. I'm not a med myself, but last time I was at the hospital, there was a guy with tuberculosis who refused treatment because it was all propaganda from Big Pharma. Yet he was there because he wanted the doctors to make him feel better. Where are you located? In my part of the world, California, if you refuse treatment for a TB, they put you into the TB ward. Germany, but I didn't really get the whole conversation. Just the nurse shouting that she'd get security if he refused to wear the face mask they gave him. I guess that's exactly what she did. A story from my friend who's a specialist chest cancer nurse in the UK, but in an area with a large West African population. A complicated subject, but in a nutshell, there's quite a lot of patients who don't pursue Western medical treatment in favor of faith healers or similar, and they may only return to hospital when things have reached a dire point. She told me about a lady who showed up one day, having not attended follow-up for months after diagnosis. When she examined her, she found the cancer had caused a festering wound in her chest that had eaten a hole through the flesh so deep that when my friend shone her torch in, she could see her aorta. The lady had just been stuffing it with tissues and hoping for the best. I was an EMT, but this one's about a call my father was on as a firefighter back when I was a kid, in the early 80s. Guy had fallen through a glass coffee table and cut his throat ridiculously wide open. It looked like he had a second mouth. Somehow he had managed to avoid the carotid arteries, but was still seriously bleeding. Oh, and did I mention he was drunk out of his mind? Refused assistance from my dad's crew. I believe the exact words were, "Do I goddamn look like I'm on fire?" Same with the cops who got there behind him and the ambulance that got there a while later. This was the early 80s. There were 0 paramedics. The ambulance attendants, I'm not even sure if they were EMTs, were coming from a long way away. They told him multiple times that he needed to go for immediate surgery or at least a crapload of stitches, and he was so blasted out of his mind that he couldn't recognize how badly injured he was. He wanted the crews to F in the general direction of off. Eventually, the cops told his wife, "We're all going to wait out here on the road until he passes out from blood loss and then take care of him after he's unconscious." He finally realized they were serious, and with a bit more cajoling, especially from his wife, he went in and got sewn up. I would guess that the continual blood loss from the injury was also doing something to make him more compliant as well. But yeah, if you're going to be treated whether you're conscious or not, you may as well go in on your own terms. In short, refusing treatment for a broken ding-dong. Oh, I really don't tell this story very often, just because it's not very nice. I used to work as a medic with an outfit in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. It wasn't uncommon to receive call-outs from the 911 dispatcher with little to no information about the situation going on. Usually an address and maybe the patient's condition or complaint if we were lucky. On one such call, we arrived to this hole-in-the-wall apartment complex to see the city fire department paramedic engine had already beat us to the scene. I asked one of the guys standing by his rig what was going on with the patient. He shrugs his shoulders and tells us he hasn't a clue. The lieutenant just told him to make sure and let us know we needed to prepare for a contaminated scene by wearing full PPE. We're talking mask, gown, gloves, and goggles. So we walk into the apartment doorway, and the first thing I noticed was a late 20s undressed female, caked in blood, passed out in the corner of the main living room. A second, similar-appearing woman was barely cognitive on the couch, talking to a fire guy and trying her best not to slur her words. As my partner and I started towards these patients, another fire guy grabs us by the arms and drags us to the bedroom where we were apparently needed the most. First impression? Well, do you remember the scene in A Nightmare on Elm Street where one of the female leads is dragged across the walls and ceiling of the bedroom? Well, this is exactly what I was looking at. Blood spatter dropping from the ceiling, bloody handprints and streaks along the walls and floor. The room was bare, except for the high-quality recording equipment in one corner, smack paraphernalia littering the floor, and in the center of the room laid a blood-soaked mattress, with a man on top laying in fetal position and rocking back and forth clutching a ratty pillow. Turns out this man was filming himself and the two other girls in what I can only imagine was supposed to be one epic, substance-fueled, ragging three-way adult film. Unfortunately for the man, right as he was about to splooge, he hit one of the girls the wrong way, breaking his Johnson in the process and splooging blood all over the ceiling and the girls. This no doubt frightened and confused the poor women as they stumbled back into the wall, smearing them with blood in the process. The cherry on top of this entire incident was the man refused to be transported and treated at a nearby hospital, even after explaining to him this would likely be the last time he'd ever be able to do the deed or urinate normally again, unless he sought out urgent medical attention at an ER. Fortunately, the LEOs were able to talk some sense into him, but my God, what a way to go out. Whew. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Student dietitian here. While on placement, I witnessed a patient be referred to ITU with end-stage kidney failure for dialysis. He hadn't been diagnosed with kidney problems, although he had noticed that when he had a big meal and a few drinks, he felt a bit achy and sore, presumably when he was overloading his body and his GFR was on the floor. Said he didn't think he felt that bad and left. Pretty sure he would have died within a short while without a transplant or at least a good dialysis regime. My brother's been refusing to take insulin for about the past 2 years now. He's read a bunch of articles and watched YouTube videos saying that a vegan diet mixed with intermittent fasting will kickstart his pancreas and cure his diabetes. Since he started this, he's gone from 5'8" and about 135 pounds to 96 pounds when they weighed him in the ICU this past week. He developed a pretty serious case of DKA on Tuesday, and when my dad took him into the hospital, his blood sugar was over 1,000. It's very hard for the doctors to be sympathetic with him because his illness is manageable if he just takes his insulin. They see people day in and day out who'd give anything to beat cancer or dementia, but there's nothing those people can do. My brother wanted to take charge and try to get his organs working the way they're supposed to. He thought that if he took the insulin they gave him, that his body would never start to produce it because it didn't absolutely need it. He's been grouchy and depressed for a very long time because his body was never actually getting the nutrients or calories from the food he was eating. He was extremely strict with his diet. I've never seen that level of dedication from anyone before. I think he's realized he's going to have to start taking his insulin on top of maintaining a healthy diet, or he won't make it very much longer. I don't know where I'm going with this rant. All of the emotions are still pretty fresh since he's still in the hospital. Yeah, I get being desperate and wanting literally any cure for your condition, but when it's at the point where your body is just shutting down from your so-called treatment, it's time to face the music, isn't it? I'm sorry, dude. Live with the D. I'm not a doctor, but I was the patient. As a kid, I was afraid of doctors and hospitals for some reason, and when I was like 11 or 12, I was walking across the street to get to the mail when I got hit by a car and was hurt real bad, and somebody called 911 without me knowing, so when the paramedics got there, I tried to run away. Yesterday, I heard about a 24-year-old male with pancreatitis who refused hospitalization. For those who don't know, acute pancreatitis is your pancreas being digested by itself. Quite deadly, especially if you try to walk it off, only to be rushed back to hospital the next day. Acute pancreatitis has a large spectrum of severity. Most of the time it resolves with just being NPO, nothing by mouth to rest the pancreas, and IV fluids. It can be quite complicated when more severe, termed acute necrotizing pancreatitis, which still can usually be resolved with fluids, bowel rest, and doesn't usually require antibiotics. Infected pancreatic necrosis is the most severe, requiring surgical debridement of the necrotic and infected pancreatic tissue. I always leave some large drains near the remaining pancreas, as it tends to further liquefy into a goop of pancreatic debris. I've seen a couple of patients do okay, and a couple die at this stage. In short, a 24-year-old may not need to be hospitalized for a mild case of pancreatitis. I just wanted to clarify your post since pancreatitis can mean a lot of things. In short, pancreatitis has a large spectrum ranging from very mild to very severe with high chances of mortality. Well, she didn't technically refuse treatment. She was demented and had a medical proxy. The poor old lady was dying of congestive heart failure. Basically, your heart doesn't pump as hard as it should, so blood backs up into your lungs, increasing pressure in those small vessels, causing fluid to leak into the lung tissue. In short, you drown on your own fluids. We were keeping her pretty out of it because it can be quite frightening, particularly if you can't remember that you're ill. What sticks with me is when she'd have brief periods of lucidity, she'd ask for Claritin for her allergies. She thought her CHF was just bad allergies. Poor lady passed away a couple of days later, but she went peacefully. I don't know why, but the tragedy of her asking for a Claritin will stick with me for the rest of my life. My girlfriend was longboarding in Peru and she fell and cut her knee. Except it wasn't just a cut, it had actually sliced all the way down to the bone and torn up a lot of skin around it. She got up, not realizing what had happened, and continued longboarding for a while. I've got maybe a different take on this. I'm a nurse on a behavioral medicine unit, and there's one patient I keep thinking about years later. He was a handsome young man, married to a beautiful wife, and they had a beautiful daughter. It really was a picture-perfect family. Early 20s is when schizophrenia usually shows up, and this poor guy was already married and had started a family when it began to manifest. He was acutely paranoid and extremely delusional. His hair became long and unkempt, long messy beard and stuff. He refused food and water, refused medication, and had a reason, usually religious, for all of this. It went on for weeks until we were finally able to get him into the state hospital, where he tried to escape, but was able to talk his way out in just a matter of weeks afterwards. Last I knew, he was in the paper after he abducted his daughter and was found in a hotel several hours later. Luckily, the daughter was safe. Mental illness can be every bit as acute as physical illness. Guy who loved to travel gets leukemia. Doesn't want to poison his body with antibiotics on top of the chemo. Refuses antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals, or anything. So the guy has unbelievable worms coming out from him. Just unbelievable. Saw a person with a heart attack refusing to get admitted, and he left ER after streptokinase infusion was over. I saw him going about his chores many months later at a convenience store. He was apparently doing just fine. Man tried to control his hypertension the natural way through herbs and spices. He stroked. He was a fit and active man, but sometimes genetics win. Yeah, sorry natural health people. That stuff might have some sort of effects on your colds and flus, but you need hard, researched chemicals to fight the bigger problems in your bodies. Patient with a history of 15-year IV smack use presented to the ER today in septic shock, secondary to a large abscess at one of the injection sites on the right arm. Due to the patient's history of long-term intravenous injection, multiple unsuccessful attempts at gaining IV access were made. Ultrasound machine was then brought in and her antecubital vein on the unaffected arm was deemed the only site available. The patient expressed a desire then to leave against medical advice because this is the only site I have left to inject and I don't want you to ruin it. We explained to the patient that in all honesty, they'd still be able to use the site for later IV substance use, but the patient didn't trust this information. They were advised she'd likely die in hours to days without treatment. They still want to leave against medical advice. The patient was then offered central line, which the patient promptly declined and then left. Not the most physically gruesome injury or illness, but the degree of addiction in this patient was pretty psychologically gruesome in my opinion. They would have rather died than run the small chance of losing the only usable site they deemed self-accessible after their recovery and discharge. The crocodile that missed a vein in her arm. Ate away so much flesh and smelled awful, and both the bones in her arm were very visible. Her elbow was only bone, no skin or muscle. They were blackened. As soon as they mentioned cutting her arm off, she dipped and ran away. Forgotten respiratory therapist here. I've had people refuse oxygen when their pulse ox was in the 60s, and of course, they're code 1. So we just end up intubating them when they can't make their own decisions anymore. It's really sad and frustrating. People refuse treatment for stuff like cancer and CHF all the time. I can understand it in a way, but it seems crazy for your gut reaction to a cancer diagnosis to be just shrugging it off. About a year ago, a young guy, a smack addict, comes into emergency. Nice enough guy, just a problem with substances. Some guy's beaten him with a baseball bat. His arms are all sorts of crazy. They looked like the arms of Mr. Tickle. I x-ray them and he has so many breaks you couldn't even count. He needs surgery. He needs his arms put back together. I take him around to wait for the doctor and he can't wait. Said he can't be bothered and wants to go hit up. When I asked him how he was going to do it, he said he'd find a friend. Walked out of the department, arms flapping in the wind, never to return. Paramedic here. I had a drunk dude that jumped from a second-floor balcony and broke his femur, then refused transport. Family took him the next day. It was a closed break at the ball with a mirror rotation, so not nasty looking, but definitely still broken.
What was your I'm in danger moment? So I was walking to my school, and there's this little street with 2 lanes that leads onto the highway that you need to pass to get to my school. I usually wait till everyone has passed since no one respects the yield, but that day, the guy in the right lane actually yielded, which was awesome. So I made my way across. Suddenly, as I passed through the right lane and entered the left lane, before my mind could process anything, my body just straight up stopped moving. I was briefly confused before I felt 2 cars barely graze both my front and backside. Apparently, the guy on the right started driving again as soon as I was out of his lane, and at the same time, a guy behind him was being impatient and jumped to the left lane without stopping for me. So they both passed me at the same time, while I survived by being frozen in the minor gap between the 2. Honestly, my subconscious is the only reason I'm alive today. Something very similar happened to me in high school. I was walking home from school down a very busy street. I was approaching an intersection, but I stopped a few feet from the edge and just froze behind the light pole. At that moment, a car runs a red light, hits the back of a car, and sends it spinning towards me. Car also clipped a motorcycle, sending it flying 40 feet in the air. The car ends up 1 foot away from the light pole. I'm behind, stopping in the area I'd usually wait to cross the street. If I hadn't just stopped, I'd be pretty badly hurt. I was in a bouncy castle at a college ball, and my friend turned the pump off as a prank. My head was sealed in the deflating plastic, and I was suffocating, kicking my legs wildly, trying to free myself. I had almost passed out when someone noticed and pulled me out. It would have been quite an monogamous end. Oh yeah, because that's a good prank. Wee! What does this do? Chicka, 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 psh. Roger, would you seriously turn off the pump to a bouncy castle with people inside? Of course not. Only when it's funny. Come on, it's only a prank. When I was about 14, I chucked a teen angst tantrum and went for an angry walk in the bushland behind my house. Didn't take my phone, didn't tell anyone where I was going, just stormed out. It started raining pretty heavily after about 45 minutes, so I turned back to head home. But a bridge I had crossed had been washed away and the creek was rising very rapidly. I stupidly skidded down the embankment to see if I could cross, but didn't realize the rain had made it too slippery for me to be able to climb back up. I vividly remember standing on that little patch of rock thinking, haha, I might die. I didn't. I climbed onto a rock ledge, waited out the storm, and managed to make my way back up the embankment and return by a different route. By that point, had been gone for about 4 hours and had escaped death only to be almost killed by my parents. My intoxicated friend knocked over another guy's pint by accident, and then his drunken brain decided he could take on the guy. The guy was built like a brick crap house, and his friends were all huge. They were the type of guys that didn't take too kindly to being challenged to a fight. We were 2 skinny 19-year-olds. Anyway, I bought Brick Crap House Guy a replacement drink and somehow talked him and his mates down from flattening the pair of us, then dragged my idiot friend out of the pub and got him home. Some people should moderate their drinking. By the way, the rule is you spill another man's pint, you immediately apologize and buy the next round. Actually, saw the guy again a few days later, small town, and he was cool about it. Private pilot story. Just on a return flight with a few mates back to Loco Aerodrome, I looked down at rudder pedals and noticed the side of my shoe was basically starting to melt. First moment of realization that the engine was indeed on fire. Ha! I'm in danger.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming up here on the beautiful sights of Washington. You can actually see the Space Needle if you take a look out to the left. Just don't look to the right because there's smoke coming from the engine and my foot is on fire. Please enjoy your stay and thank you very much for flying with Western Airlines.
A retired cop my dad knows has a great story. I guess this was like the 70s or 80s. A pregnant woman spent the night at her mother's house while her husband was at a bachelor party. She comes home in the morning and sees the door is ajar, but she knows she locked it. She runs to the neighbors and calls the police. She calls the house where the guys were supposed to be, but no one answers because it's like 7 a.m. after a novel of hard drinking. My dad's friend and another officer shows up. They talk to the wife and decide to check the house out just in case. Since she was pregnant, she's going to wait at the neighbor's house. So they walk in and shout, "It's the police! If anyone is there, come out now!" Or something like that. Then they start checking rooms. Nothing in the living room, nothing in the hall. But then they get to the kitchen. There is broken glass on the floor and what they think must be blood. So they call for backup and they keep looking. Nothing in the other bedroom, nothing in the washroom, bathroom. Finally, they get to the master bedroom and see clothes on the bed. And they can hear someone in the master bathroom. "This is the police! Come out now!" they shout. And nothing. Finally, they decide to go in full force. They open the door and run in, weapons hot. They see a man completely in his birthday suit, blood all over himself and the bathroom, passed out on the floor. The medicine cabinet is open and everything that was in it was on the floor in the sink. The guy in the birthday suit wrapped his foot in a towel and there was blood coming from it. Though they couldn't get him to talk, as he was unconscious, they called in for an ambulance. A few minutes later, the backup guys and the ambulance arrives and they start treating the guy. Then my dad's friend goes to tell the pregnant woman about the intoxicated guy in his birthday suit that broke into her house. She was horrified. Because he was passed out and had lost the blood, the medics take him to the hospital. The pregnant woman and the neighbors are all looking out the window as they wheel the guy out, covered in a blanket, handcuffed to the stretcher. She just loses it, is laughing and crying, potentially hysterics from being pregnant. By this time, one of the other cops was inside and he starts trying to calm her down. He's afraid she is going to go into premature labor. Finally, the neighbor explained that the guy they had arrested was the pregnant lady's husband. It turned out his buddies dropped him off about half an hour before his wife got home. He stripped down for a shower, then decided to get some water, shattered a glass, then stepped on it, then wrapped his foot in the dish towel and crawled to the bathroom where he tried to disinfect it, but instead spilled everything, got blood everywhere, and passed out. That must have been a hell of a bachelor party. A couple of days ago, I was working up a tree, arborist. The tree in question was a black locust that was dying at the top. However, the base looked fine. I set about slowly dismantling the tree, which was an awkward task because I couldn't get as high up onto the tree as I wanted due to the decay, and it was growing over a building, so I couldn't just let the bits free fall. After an hour or so of working, I heard a snap about a meter above me while I was about 13 meters up into the crown. I looked up to see a long branch above me that was growing into the crown of another tree had snapped. I realized instantly that this meant that the base of the tree I was in had failed, and I was going to go down with it if I didn't get out. Before I could even react, the tree was free falling down towards the outbuilding that I had been working so hard to avoid. Time slowed down, and I could see my colleagues standing in the woodland watching me with pure fear on their faces. After that, it's hard to put thoughts into words, but I remember looking down at where the tree was going to land and thinking that it's weird because this second I am completely lucid, but a second from not I will be probably unconscious, possibly never to regain consciousness. Yet I didn't feel any panic, just a knowing that I'm in extreme danger. All I could do was grab the nearest branch and plant my feet on another one and hope to God that I didn't end up under any part of the tree. After what seemed like forever, the tree came down onto the roof of the outbuilding. I had probably traveled 10 meters vertically and about the same laterally. The large limbs of the tree that were previously to my right, but were now above me, didn't snap and crush me like I was sure they would. I managed to hold onto my branch and stayed roughly in the middle of the tree. I was free from injury, other than a twisted ankle and a twinge in my wrist from holding on tight as the tree smashed down. I don't know how I didn't get seriously screwed up by that tree, and I don't know why it failed on me, but I will never forget that knowing that I'm in danger, falling with tons of wood, and there was nothing I could do about it. My third year fighting forest fires, I was upgraded to pump truck operator for a mop-up crew. After a section of the fire was deemed extinguished, they send in mop-up to make sure it's actually really out. I drove a giant pickup truck with a huge tank of soapy water and filled up portable water bags for the mop-up fighters. On my way back to base, I had a bit of water left when I saw plumes of white smoke. You're urged to extinguish all smoke because no one wants a dead fire to come back to life. There's a fallen tree next to a bunch of bushes and another half-fallen tree, and the half-fallen tree is spewing hot coals every couple seconds with a loud pop. Each pop of hot coals makes the other wood products take off. The fire was at risk of starting over again right here. I had nothing but a small ant bladder bag. I bounded down to the pump truck, grabbed a hose, ran it up, bounded down, turned the hose on, ran up, and began attacking the situation. As I'm chasing down the heat and fuel source, I realize I'm surrounded by flammable objects. Soon after, I'm surrounded by giant flames, alone. I was literally screaming and laughing as I hacked and sprayed away at the rising flames. I got it tamed down after soaking and chopping, killed the main source. I also sprayed the heck out of the branches so soapy water was dripping everywhere. I had just finished rolling the hose back up and was catching my breath when these Marines came running up the hill. They were sent to investigate the smoky mess I've been dealing with. Being high-fived by a Marine is a good feeling. I know you guys might hear this a lot in general, where people say like, hey, appreciate your firefighters, but seriously, appreciate the people doing this. Fighting fires is absolutely no joke. Incredibly grateful. It's something I know I personally could never do. When I was about 12, a friend from our local church drove me and his sons to go swimming at a creek near where we lived. I didn't know how to swim yet, but he assured me that I'd be fine since there wasn't much water and it could be a good learning experience. So far, pretty normal stuff. It gets weird though. The water was much deeper than expected and he did nothing to help on several occasions when I almost drowned. I was supposed to stay at his house overnight, but wasn't feeling very good after breathing in water a few times. Plus, something obviously didn't feel right. He was mumbling to himself while he put his shoes back on after swimming. Good thing I stayed home. Turns out he was off his medication. My family didn't know that he had previously terminated a person during a hunting trip when he was in his early teens. The night I decided to go home, he went off the rails. He believed that the world was going to end, so he tried to terminate his whole family. When my family went to church that Sunday, we didn't see his family. The pastor told us what happened. They had all miraculously survived, but he was now in lockup for his serious issues. Almost drowned, almost taken out. Family friend was a murderer, and we didn't know it. Going home from a party in a shared Uber with some friends, I mistook the street for another one and ended up further away from my apartment than I thought. I put the GPS on, and of course it makes you take some back alley. At one, I saw some movement near a car, and there was a guy looking at me. I pass him, try to call my friend because he was looking weird. By the way, I did the wrong number and someone got a voicemail from me sounding totally terrified and spitting nonsense. I walk faster and look back. He is ducking behind another car and clearly switched from his original place, and he had a small knife in his hand. I bolted from there and ran as fast as possible with adrenaline and stopped after finding a busy street. But when I saw the knife, I definitely went, oh crap. I was on holiday and had left my hotel to walk to Livingstone National Park in Zimbabwe. My friends had visited earlier in the day and wanted to stay by the pool, so I figured I'd walk over by myself, since it wasn't a particularly long trip. The easiest route for my hotel was following a small path between some bushes and trees. I'd been down the path before, but this time, there were families of baboons walking down this path and no other person. I walked on anyway, figuring that as long as I wasn't waving food around or getting too close, I'd be fine. Apparently, I must have done the latter and unintentionally stepped too close to one of their young, because one of the full-grown adult baboons jumped out in front of me and started howling at me, baring its teeth. Because of the noise it was making, it attracted the attention of all the other baboons, and 2 other full-grown adults soon joined the first and howling and showing serious aggression, all of a couple of yards in front of me and to my side. I had no idea if there were more behind me, but my instinct in the situation was to hold up my hands to show empty palms, stand tall, broad, and start stepping backwards and away slowly. Thankfully, it worked. They eventually turned away and carried on, but for a short while, my mind was having flashes of being torn apart by 3 baboons. I later found out their bites can break human bones, so I'm pretty lucky that my instinct in the situation was the correct one. I arrived for work at a bank, stepped inside, and had a stranger say, "Happy April Fools," and put a revolver against my temple. 2 robbers, both with revolvers and rifles, had made their way inside before opening, and had bailed up the manager as he arrived and then the staff as they arrived. They were talking to a third accomplice on walkie-talkies. I was told to lie face down on the ground, arms on my back and legs together. One robber was going down the line, hog-tying staff with cable ties, while the other had a manager and supervisors unlocking safes. All along, there were threats not to look or move, or you would be shot. The robber had just tied my wrists together with the pistol lying on the ground between my legs when I heard a commotion. A staff member had managed to exit while they were distracted. The robbers followed him and left the bank quickly. They got nothing. All in all, I was there with 15 other staff for about 35 minutes. They were caught further down the track. These were career bank robbers who pulled off a number of robberies over a period of time before being caught. It was really like a movie, dressed in suits, dark glasses, gloves, black spray paint over the cameras. You open the time lock safe, you get ready to open safe deposit boxes, you do the night safe. They certainly had a plan. 6 months later, the same branch was hit by another group. I had since moved to another city, but that robbery, according to my colleagues who were in both, was way more terrifying. I was living with a man I'd known for a month. New York City be like that, and one day I left without saying anything to him. I was at McDonald's and he texted and asked if I was at Papa John's, which was across from McDonald's. Thought, oh, creepy. Then I got home and we had a conversation where he started talking about something I just texted my girlfriend about, and it was a topic we had never discussed before. Red flag. I'm in danger. All the times he seemed to be in the right place at the right time, had food for me when I hadn't eaten, hit me all at once. Found out, dude had spyware on my phone and was watching my every move. So 100% agree, this is extremely creepy and no one should be doing this. But with a weird, cute, twisted idea, what if, ironically, he actually just was really caring, but he had no idea how to properly give that kind of care? Hey, buddy, you had a good workout? I bet you did. That was some really good Pilates in there. I brought you some water and this really delicious Big Mac for that nice protein. You need your protein, Big Mac?
Yeah, thanks, buddy, but I didn't tell you I was going to go for a workout.
Oh, I know. I'm your Papa Bird, watching you wherever you go. Gotta have a Big Mac for a big man. I love you. Yeah. When I was 18 years old, I was living in my first apartment by myself. I had no roommates, and my parents had just moved. My downstairs neighbors were a group of 20-somethings who had lots of traffic. Constantly people coming and going, parties multiple times per week. Rarely saw the same people twice. One day, I noticed a blacked out vehicle in one of the parking lots. I swear I saw a camera with a long lens through the heavily tinted windows, but I just kind of brushed it off. Maybe it's paranoia. Over the next 3 days, I see more and more surveillance. Vans, sedans, trucks, all of them mirror black and limo tint windows. They would sit there for 8 or so hours at a time, and another vehicle would rotate in and relieve the post. Then, quick as they came, they disappeared one day. Now I'm getting concerned. I have no idea what is going on, but someone is definitely watching my apartment building. 2 weeks after I saw the last surveillance vehicle, I go out on my balcony for a smoke. That's when I see the cops. Holy crap. So many freaking cops. They were stacked up, breaching style on the sides of the building adjacent to me. There were probably 24 uniformed officers. Suddenly they fan out, weapons drawn and hot, and aimed at my building. They take defensive positions and are yelling at each other. One of them motions at me aggressively to go inside. Then a file of 12 SWAT officers begin closing in on my building, walking right up the path. I'm crapping my pants now because I've got a half an ounce of herbs and alcohol in my house, and there's 40 cops outside. I go inside and hide everything as best I can and go to the window that faces outside so I can watch this crazy crap go down. The neighbors below me got raided. The SWAT team fired a launcher of some sort through their windows. I heard 5 loud pops followed by acrid smoke wafting through my vents. They forcefully entered the apartment and I heard so freaking many shots. One small caliber pop followed by a roar of larger weapons. Must have been 100 rounds. I threw myself on the floor of my apartment as I listened to the supersonic crack of rounds missing. It seemed to never stop. I guess the neighbors were major players in the illegal substance game, and one of them pulled their piece during the raid, so the SWAT team terminated all 3 of them. The apartment building was condemned, and I had to move back in with my parents. After the fact, I realized how lucky I was to not get shot on my balcony or struck by a stray round in my home. Sometimes I have flashbacks and nightmares to that moment. My face on the uncomfortably thick carpet, blue-gray smoke in the apartment, glass shattering, drywall cracking, rounds flying.
What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? In primary school, we had a World War I memorial lesson, and we were asked if anyone had any relatives who fought at the time. My friend brought in a picture of his great-great-grandfather with his wife. A girl also brought in a picture of her great-great-grandfather with his wife. The teacher said they looked similar. She put them side by side and looked shocked. We gathered around and it was the same man who had kept his 2 wives a secret. Both had been married privately. My classmates were cousins and didn't know. Dude, a similar thing happened to me. I was going to school with a female classmate for years, and one year my family had a big reunion and she showed up. Turns out we were cousins and we actually started hanging out more at school. Met a dude at a local 24-hour fitness who was wearing a Shark Punch shirt. Since most people have no freaking clue about the band, I immediately decided I needed to talk to bro out with this dude about his particular taste in music, which was metal. We got to talking, find out he's a drummer, lives locally and wants to start jamming some evil stuff. We exchanged numbers and all that good stuff. Of course, however, actually meeting up with reliable musicians is something harder than it sounds, despite the enthusiasm. Around the same time, I was working security at a local bar, and I met this random cute girl who wasn't from the area, but was totally into me and wanted to hang out. We exchanged numbers and we started planning a meetup. When we finally did, we hit it off pretty well, but she had mentioned that she's still kind of dating around, but really liked me and hoped that I was okay with that. I was totally okay with that because I was doing the same thing. We hung out maybe another time or so, and then shortly after that she hit me with the "sorry, but I'm kinda dating this other guy for serious" line, and I said I totally understood and moved on. When Jim Guy and I finally managed to get together to jam, a friend of his was there to play bass with us. We got introduced, started talking about random stuff, when Jim Guy happened to mention to his buddy about this girl he was dating. He and I started sharing our similarities and preferences of people we've dated, and I asked him to see what she looked like. He's like, "Sorry dude, she doesn't have any social media or anything like that, but I have a video of her at some restaurant we went to a few weeks back." He shows me the video. "Ah man, she's cute. Yeah, I met her outside at some bar in LA. Dude, she really reminds me of this girl I was dating not too long ago. What's her name?" "Kim." "Wait, really? That's so weird. I was dating a girl named Kim too. What are the odds? Hold up. Does she have a Snapchat?" Yeah? Why? At this moment, I started trying to find her on Snap. Dude, what's her name on there? My gym buddy's friend at this time starts looking at both of us. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Kimbersleys. The friend starts dying of laughter at this point, and we both come to the realization that we are the same dudes she ended up leaving/staying with. But we still ended up jamming anyways. This was basically that episode of Friends where Joey and Ross date the same girl. Maybe this isn't that big, but here it goes. I'm a medic, and one morning we had a call for an older woman, in her 70s if I remember right. She was having cardiac issues, was in compensated shock from a very low heart rate. From the time we got to her home to the time we were in the ambulance, she had been getting worse. We paced her heart and she was doing good the rest of our whole ride to the hospital. About 16 hours later, we get called for a rollover car accident. Get there and we have one male in the vehicle, unresponsive. Vehicle is upside down off the road. We get him out and he's in very bad shape. He wasn't breathing, so we intubated him and off to the hospital we went. Almost at the hospital, which is 30 miles away, and he goes into traumatic cardiac arrest. He's dead when we get there. While we were on the way to the hospital, we found his wallet, since we didn't know who he was. We saw a badge and he was a retired police officer, and I remember from the morning our patient's husband was a retired police officer. He was on his way to see his wife. Unfortunately, he stopped by the bar first. While it wasn't my job, I went to the nurse to talk to the wife and let her know what happened. She thanked me for being there so much for her family that day. I had a similar experience to this one. We had an old couple in different wards in our hospital. I was treating the wife on my geriatric station. On one of my weekly night shifts, I responded to a CPR alarm to reanimate the husband. It didn't go successfully. I personally took my patient to see her husband for one last time. It was one of the most emotionally draining days of my residency. I have a coworker who we'll call Joe. Great guy who has an equally great wife. Over the years, and even prior to meeting Joe, multiple doctors told Nina she would be unable to get pregnant on her own due to problems with her ovaries and fallopian tubes. She and Joe decided that a child-free life was okay with them. So she and Joe got married and lived happily for 12 years. When they started out, they didn't have much, but as time passed, they progressed in their careers and made a nice living for themselves. Finally, they got to the point where they were comfortable enough to buy a sports car for themselves, something Joe always wanted to do. It was his first new off-the-lot car that he ever owned. Now, Joe and Nina were in their early 40s at the time and figured that they would just coast on into retirement. Well, about 6 months after they bought their brand new car, winter came. Nina got a case of the flu and just couldn't seem to shake it. She just felt run down and nauseous, just not herself. After about 3 weeks of this, she went to the doctor. The doctor asked if there was any possibility she could be pregnant. She laughed at him and said, "I've been married for 12 years now and haven't had so much as a scare of being pregnant. Multiple doctors said it's not going to happen for me, so there's no way." But her doctor said, "Humor me. Let me rule it out. Just do a urine test." Well, wanting to figure out what was actually wrong with her ASAP, Nina peed on the stick and you guessed it, pregnant. So in their 40s with 12 years of living, just the two of them, they were expecting. After the initial shock wore off, they were actually pretty excited even though they had to sell the new sports car, since a two-seater wasn't really going to be working for them. A few months later, their son John came into the world the usual way, happy and a healthy baby. And still are today. John just finished his first year of high school, great kid and super smart too. You just never know what life's gonna throw at you. My sister's boyfriend decided he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave a 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a coworker, and a week of digging later, it turns out that he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. This same thing happened to the mother of my friend growing up. She was dating a guy for a few years and things were getting pretty serious. Then one day he goes on holiday to visit his parents in Argentina. She goes to meet him at the airport when he's due to come home and there's no sign of him for hours. So she calls him and he says he's contracted a serious illness in Argentina and he isn't well enough to fly back, and basically says that he doesn't have long to live. She panics and phones him every day to see how he is. He starts avoiding her calls, and after about a week of not responding, she thinks it's the worst and contacts the police, who trace his credit card use to London, where he lives. They find an address that it's linked to, and then she starts doing some digging. So she goes to the address only to find his wife and infant daughter, while he's away on a supposed business trip. They both bonded over what a complete a-hole he is, and both decided that they were better off without him and dramatically left him when he got back from his business trip. Pretty sure these two women are still friends. It's crazy that there are some people out there that can't even land partners in this world, but there are others that have like 5 secret families. The Matrix is really throwing around the stats in the create a player mode. It's 1991, I'm 19 and just signed the lease on my first solo apartment. I just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit that paycheck at the ATM, another first. I'd always gone into the bank to do this. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror, I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I've been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked that I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at the theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And I tell them that I was going to call them anyways because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we've got your card and your $200, so just come down to the police station. That's what they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. It doesn't make sense. So I just drive down there. The detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use the ATM and saw a man acting suspicious while he was using it, moving back and forth as if he was trying to dodge the cameras. Bob says that the man then left the ATM, got into a car and drove away at high speeds as if he was fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200 and another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob then realized that he had withdrawn money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police station and reported the attempted theft. The detectives give me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man 5'7", brown hair and rounded gold-rimmed glasses. I say out loud, so about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine? Before realizing Bob was describing me. I've never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left because I'm a freaking idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19 and that's just how I drive. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him that I was the crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole from myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet, I still have the police report where I was both the victim and the perp. I'm curious about how the guy who returned everything to the police was able to withdraw the money. Wouldn't you need the same PIN number? Or did the OP just leave without closing out his account? Crazy stuff. I told this in another thread, but it's still hilarious to me. Guy I knew in my high school English class was talking about one winter day how he was late to school because someone hit his mailbox. His parents made him fix it up before he went to school. He missed his ride and had to walk instead, but the school staff was cool about it and they didn't punish him. A few minutes later, another girl came into the class and she was talking about how her morning sucked. She lost control going down a hill and hit someone's mailbox. She freaked out and drove off before anyone noticed and described a few details of the house. Mailbox guy puts 2 and 2 together and burst out, "You hit my mailbox!" He wasn't super mad about it and she turned beet red. It was hilarious how they both reacted at the time. We lived in Florida at the time, and my dad goes to the eye doctor because he's seeing double. In all other aspects, he's healthy. He explains his symptoms to the doctor. This was in the early 2000s. The doctor picks up a medical book on eye problems. He finds the kind of symptoms my dad is describing. The doctor shows him the book. In the book, there is a whole medical page explaining what he is experiencing and a picture of a kid from the 1960s. My dad looks at the picture and says, "Doc, that's me!" The doc says, "Yes, those are the symptoms you are showing." My dad says, "No, that's really me in the picture." It turns out my dad had this eye problem when he was a kid. It's so rare that they took his picture in Ohio in the 1960s and slapped him in a book of rare eye problems. He doesn't remember much about taking the picture, but he did manage to get a copy and take it home for himself. I dated a girl who lived in a city I had recently moved away from. On my birthday, I drove out there so we could be together and go out to dinner. The entire time we were at dinner, she was distant and constantly checking her phone / sending texts, etc. There was virtually no conversation, and her constant texting was uncharacteristic and started to give me the vibe that she was either cheating on me or was just not into the relationship anymore. When we finished eating, she asked if it was okay for me to stop by a mutual friend's house to pick up some substances. I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was a pretty selfish request considering it was my birthday, and I don't even do that stuff. As we were walking up the steps to my friend's apartment, I'm running through the different ways for me to break off this relationship until the door opens and I realize she had planned a big surprise party with a ton of my friends, many which she didn't even know. All of the texts and lack of attention that I had been attributing to the lack of interest in me turned out to be the exact opposite. She's actually a pretty beautiful person. I've totally been here before. Well, kind of. I totally understand the overthinking people's actions, but I've never had a surprise party before. Was on a flight from Paris to Boston. I had the aisle seat across from a little hall of bathrooms in the middle of the plane. At one point, a man from a few rows up goes into a bathroom and after a couple of minutes comes out and is just standing in the aisle. So it gets my attention. He keeps going in and coming back out looking up towards where he was sitting. I see a woman sitting next to his empty seat shake her head at him, but he doesn't give up. Finally, after 5 times of coming in and out, he finally gets the woman to come back there. The lights are out and most of the plane is sleeping. They start making out in the bathroom hallway before he goes into one and pulls her in with him. They are in there for quite a while and then he comes out and goes back to his seat, and a few minutes later she comes out and does the same. They are really flirty in their seats and about an hour later repeat this. The man goes in and she joins him. They end up doing this 3 times throughout the flight. My husband, who is sitting next to me, has caught on to what they are doing as well, and we make a joke about how they must be newlyweds on their honeymoon. We get off the plane and the woman is standing there at her gate waiting, and the man is nowhere in sight. As the people from the back of the plane get off, a completely different man goes up to her and gives her a kiss on the lips and asks her if she was able to get any sleep on the flight, and he calls her dear. They then walk off to the luggage area with their arms around each other. So apparently what we thought was this adventurous newlywed couple was actually a woman hooking up with her seatmate while her husband was sitting in the back of the plane. Maybe it's a thing they do, maybe they were swingers. I really hope so, because that's rank otherwise. My only thought while listening to this story was, how did they get away with it 3 times? I worked for a bank at their call center as a workforce admin. We had a supervisor with a higher than normal personal rotation. People would be doing okay, then suddenly their numbers would drop and quit. In one of those instances, the guy quitting made a big freaking scene, called him out, insulted him, and pushed him around and ended up being restrained by other coworkers. At the HR meeting, supervisor is going off on this guy, bringing up every single thing the guy did wrong. He was boasting a bit too about how he would fix all of this dude's mistakes. The entire time this guy sat silent, said nothing, just stared at whomever asked him something. When the HR rep asked if he had anything to add, he pulled out a tape recorder and just played recording after recording. Of what, you ask? Of the supervisor literally threatening this guy, harassing him, belittling him, and overall being a complete jerk. Apparently, this guy would target overperforming agents and make their working environment hell to protect his position. I'm told the supervisor simply stared at his feet and nodded when he was told he was fired. The agent, as I understand it, was also let go, but he was very well compensated. For a semester in high school, my English teacher set up this game where one student was a secret killer. Every couple of days, the killer would sneak a note into a classmate's locker, backpack, textbook, or whatever that says, "You've been killed." My best friend and I were trying harder than anyone else in the class to play detective on this, especially near the end of the semester. Near the end of the school year, there was still 6 students left alive. They took the last 6 students who were alive and brought them into the front of the class one at a time, so we could all debate if he or she was the killer or not, and the person could plead their case. The teacher brings up my friend and says, "Okay, tell us what happened." And my friend just starts explaining on how he had to be really sneaky on this. So there was a good 20 seconds where I just didn't understand what he was talking about. There wasn't any great reveal or drum roll. He just brought him in front of the class and started explaining how he killed everybody. I lost my mind pretty good. The other twist that I forgot to mention was that at week 2 or 3, he had went to a student that we didn't really talk too much and told him that he was the killer and that he needed him to kill John Deere 89. So he hands him a few of the notes, and from there on out, he had one guy on the inside helping him kill people. That's why he could kill so many people without being caught, because if someone got killed, I was with my friend so I could vouch for him. The teacher said that there was nothing in the rule book that said you couldn't get another person to help you kill people. It was a huge gamble because the other kid could have just said, "I caught the killer," and the game would have been over. I forgot to mention, if you guess who the killer is, nothing happens. You have to catch them in the act. So when there was only a few people left, everyone is yelling, "You're the killer! You're the killer!" and just pointing fingers back and forth. This teacher sounds awesome. I wish there was more teachers like this because I had a teacher in high school that had us read Fight Club, and I thought that was so wild. I was always excited to go to his class. I graduated law and got engaged to a girl I had been with through university. We both applied to the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out that she was cheating on me with a mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there too. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down. Her too, as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, only to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathe more than anyone in the world. Wait, you left in 2006. I was the guy who replaced you on that program. Your story was told to me at the bar at the Funatui about 100 times in the first month that I was there. I can't believe that I'm now seeing this on Reddit. Holy freaking crap. Yep, that was me. I hid out in the Funatui Lagoon Hotel for about 5 nights a week. Small world. Dude, I can only imagine how it must feel to want to get away from somebody, get the opportunity to do so, and then end up trapped with them for 2 years. Was at a big art show with my wife and kid. They were 3 or 4 at the time. We were walking up to a doorway and I noticed a couple of huge unclothed statues. I mean, like, no big deal to me, but I was worried about what the kid was going to say because he's a bit of a loudmouth at the best of times. But I didn't need him yelling about private parts in the middle of a crowded art gallery. I realized that the worst thing to do would be to make any kind of scene about it. No covering eyes or anything, just subtly angling the stroller away from the statues and making big deals about the art things on the opposite side of the aisle. Then the inevitable happens. I remember it happening in slow motion. My kid's head turns towards the unclothed statues. Eyes widen, arm raises and finger points, and mouth slowly opens. "Dad, look at those statues! They're not wearing socks!"
On my grandmother's deathbed, she asked me, "Do you know who your real mother is? What major plot twist moment have you had in your life?" My grandmother passed away just over 2 weeks ago. The family all went to see her for the last time. She was surprisingly aware of everything around her and telling stories and joking. I went and sat by her and we talked for a little while about various things. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you know who your real mother is?" Now, I've only ever known one woman to be my mother and had never considered otherwise. I was shocked and asked her to repeat herself, thinking I misheard her. She said it again. "Do you know who your real mother is?" I looked over to my aunt with a confused look on my face who, addressing my grandmother, said, "Blank is his mother, Nanny." My grandmother laughed for a second and said, "Oh yeah, I guess I know who your mother is too." Now, I'm fairly certain my mother is actually my mother. Since then, I've been trying to justify her saying that though. All I can think is either she was very out of it and didn't know what she was saying, or there's someone else in my family who doesn't know their real mother and she mistook me for them. I'm not sure I should pursue this any further with my family, as any reason to keep it secret is probably a decent one, and I'm not so sure I want to know the answer. But it also has me wondering, has anyone else had a major plot twist moment in their lives, whether it turned out to be true or not? My grandfather was dying of cancer. He was a big, tough man and gradually just wasted away. Sometime near the end, he asked my grandmother to bring him a piece of paper and a pen. He wrote down all the names of his 27 grandchildren. Next to my name was a check. Nobody else had anything next to their names. My grandmother showed it to me after he died. She had no idea what it meant. I still think about it every once in a while. When I was 15, my siblings and I were put into foster care. We had no idea why until the social worker told us that our parents were using drugs, our after-school jobs were helping them pay for drugs when they said our money was being saved, my dad wasn't my real dad, and 3 out of my 5 siblings were my half-siblings, and my real dad kidnapped my brother and I when we were babies. We were returned to my mom when he confessed to murdering a woman and then went to jail. He had since been released, and we visited him to discover that he'd started another family. It was quite the mind freak. My grandpa was having trouble hearing, and it took us a while to convince him to get a hearing aid. In the meantime, he got a phone call saying his Uncle John had died. He asked about a funeral and was told there wasn't one. That was 2, maybe 3 years ago. I really only saw John when he came up for Christmas, but he was quite the character and my whole family missed him. A couple weeks ago, my grandpa's cousin came to visit me. Grandpa was talking about how he missed John since he died. His cousin said, "What are you talking about? I just saw him 2 weeks ago." Turns out my grandpa misheard the phone call. We figure someone else died, but we still don't know who. John's probably been wondering why no one invites him for Christmas anymore, or visits, or calls. My twin sister and I were born through in vitro fertilization. Our mom wanted nothing more than to have kids, and her circumstances led her to use a sperm donor. When we were 3 years old, our mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. When we were 6, she passed away. My sister and I were taken in by our aunt, our mom's younger sister. She already had 2 sons and a husband. It was a crazy and emotional time for all of us, but we've become an amazing family unit, and I consider my mom, dad, and brothers as much my immediate family as my sister. You might think this was the major plot twist in my life, but it gets crazier. About 4 years ago, I learned that not only did my original mother have sperm donated to her, but she also had eggs donated to her as well, by her little sister. I lost my biological mom only to be rescued by my genetic mom. All those years I had laughed at people who said I looked like my brothers and my mom, but the joke was on me. When I think about the sacrifices my 2 moms have made for me and my sister, it blows my mind. I like that this one has a nice happy ending. A lot of the time, a story like this doesn't. I was looking for my social security card in my parents' desk, and I found their marriage certificate. It was dated 1 year later than I thought, 6 months before I was born. All of a sudden, the years of thinking my mother resented being stuck home with the kids, the terrible, resentful marriage they had, it all made sense. I actually found out shortly after my grandmother died that she and her husband adopted my mom. From where or why, we have no idea. Mom and I know that we have the same type of ethnic heritage as the people she thought were her parents, which probably indicates she was adopted from somewhere within the family or close friends at least. Perhaps more interesting is the fact that on her deathbed, I was 100% convinced that my grandma was saying "I love you" and gathered the whole family to hear, only to realize that she was just desperately thirsty and saying "I want juice." Back when I was in college, I got a girl pregnant. When my mother found out, she broke down crying and divulged that I have a brother out there that I had never met. She'd given the boy up for adoption long before I came around. I still wonder to this day if I'll ever run into him. When I was a kid, my parents took me to Universal Studios in LA. When we were there, we met Mr. T, and I spent the next 20 years telling my friends that I had met Mr. T. Everything came crashing down when I had dinner one night with my parents and a girlfriend. The topic of meeting famous people came up, and I told my Mr. T story. My parents chuckled and corrected me, "You mean you met a character impersonator playing Mr. T?" Childhood ruined. Oh, that really sucks. I think we all have at least one story like this. When I was 12 or 13, my parents took me out to eat at a restaurant. My dad gave me some change to go play a couple arcade games there, and when I ran out of money, I sat back down. My parents had completely serious looks on their faces, and my dad asked me, "How would you react if we told you that you were adopted?" I freaked out a bit, and then they moved on to a different topic. I wondered about it for years until I realized I act just like my dad, and I look like both my mom and my dad. When I was 7, I found my birth certificate in the basement of my childhood home. The name under father was not the man I'd believed to be my dad my entire life. I didn't tell anyone about it for years. Not exactly major, but when my sister needed a passport, she had to have the signatures of both legal parents. That's when we found out her only legal parent is our mom. Dad just never got around to signing the papers. Worked out well, since only needing one signature made it a lot faster. The largest one for me was finding out my parents were never married, although together for 15 plus years, because my father was still technically married to his first wife, who miraculously got pregnant and had a child while he was in jail for a year for aiding and abetting a known felon. He's a former Kentucky hillbilly that used to run moonshine back in the day. He refused to turn in his cousin. Multiple things occurred to me that day. 1, my dad is a felon. 2, I'm a bastard. 3, I have a not quite half sister somewhere. 4, my mother basically had a long affair with my father. And 5, I hope like heck there is no inbreeding somewhere because this story is the epitome of the stereotypes I had heard. So recently I helped clean out my parents' basement since they really needed it. That place was a mess. I find a box with a bunch of pictures in it and begin to reminisce about how awesome my childhood was. Me on the NES, me at Disney World, my brother and I at a football game. But then I get to the last picture on the bottom. It's my dad, my mom, and some random chick that looked to be in her early 20s. The picture, judging by the hair, was taken mid to late 80s and early 90s. Hey dad, I called. Mom was out of the house. What? He yelled from upstairs. Who's in this picture? I went upstairs to show him. He stared at it for a moment, blinked, and said, "That's your half-sister Andrea." What? I pursue it more. Half-sister? What are you talking about? I then proceeded to find out that he'd been married before when he was 18 to some stripper from Vegas. He lived in Arizona until he was about 30. Lorelei, or her stripper name, Karma, had been married to him for about a year until he realized she was a shopaholic, shoplifting, dealing drugs, taking drugs, and was abusive to her daughter. He got the heck out and gave the child to his parents to raise since he was 19 years old. Now I have a half-sister I plan to meet. I found out my stepfather was my biological father whilst who I thought was my dad was still actively in my life. Okay, it's complex, so I'll break it down. I was born to my mother and her husband, we'll call him Roger. So Mom and Roger were my parents. I grew up thinking Roger was my dad. I knew of nothing else other than these two as my birth parents. When I was 4, my mom and Roger got divorced. My older siblings were always allowed to go visiting Roger, and I rarely got to. I grew up desperately wanting to see my dad Roger. When I was 7, my mother married a new man who became my stepfather. We'll call him Bob. So I grew up with Bob being a great stepdad to me. But it always hurt that I never saw my dad Roger. And as I got older, I got angrier and angrier that I never got to see my dad Roger. Because hey, what kid who loves their dad wouldn't be? So one day after I hit puberty around 12, Bob and I got into a fight and he was telling me off and I pulled out the "You're not my real dad" line, which cued my mother and Bob to sit me down and tell me that Bob is my biological father and that Roger's not my father, only a man I was led to believe was my biological father in order to keep up appearances to the outside world. My dad is a real-life superhero. He has graphic synesthesia. He sees numbers as colors and shapes because those sections of his brain are connected in ways normal people's aren't. And he used that to catch a man who was skimming accounts when he worked at a bank. So my dad worked at a bank and for fun, he'd scroll down through the account balances and watch the patterns of color. He did this just about every day, and over time, he noticed more and more zeros. They stood out because they're empty space to him and it looks ugly. He was noticing this in a couple thousand accounts too. Just a few black spaces at the ends of strings of color. He took it to the police because his boss wasn't listening to him. Turns out his boss was the guy skimming the accounts. But the police never took the investigation seriously until my dad compiled the evidence on his own and took it to them. My dad's a cool guy. This one is actually a really cool and interesting story. People are just awesome. While at a party about 5 years ago, I met a girl who I really clicked with. Friends-wise, I'm a girl. I started talking about my boyfriend, but not by that title, by name. She proceeded to tell me she knew him and had actually recently been on a date with him, and how it was the most romantic date she'd ever been on. My boyfriend. Of a year. Yeah, it just got real. Yes, we broke up shortly afterwards. That girl ended up being one of my best friends, and we're still friends to this day. I met a girl at a bar while my boyfriend and a group of friends and me and this girl hit it off. We drank and laughed all night long. We became Facebook friends and ended up hanging out fairly often. I considered her one of my favorite people to be around. One day, she blocked me on Facebook and stopped talking to me. I was hurt and confused. Me and my boyfriend lived together and I told him about it and all he really said was, "Oh, weird. Well, screw her. Plot twist? My boyfriend of 4 years had gotten her pregnant. Eesh. Me and the boyfriend split up, obviously, and now her, my ex, and their kid live with his uncle in a trailer park. Second plot twist. After we split, I was depressed, went on a huge drinking binge, met the lead singer of my all-time favorite band at a show, we hit it off, I quit drinking, and now I'm happily married to a guy I had a crush on for 10 years. Well, that one was a little bit of a roller coaster. At least the original poster ended up happy. Sounds like maybe the ex not so much. The day we found out that the doctors were going to stop being aggressive with my father's treatment was very difficult. My grandparents flew back from Florida to get his affairs in order. Apparently, my dad, a near-broke alcoholic, had not paid any of his life insurance premiums. My grandparents found out and paid all the late bills, which allowed my siblings to collect on the multi-million-dollar policy. To this day, I'm grateful because I didn't find out until a few days after about the whole situation. Now, I have enough money to pay for college and buy my first home. One of my cousins does not have the same father as her sisters. Their father found a handwritten note in which their mother wrote about her affair, the pregnancy, and then confronted her about it. They ended up staying married and are currently married to this day. My mother and father found out and told me a few years ago. It was a slip-up that I continually pursued until I got the answers. There are only 5 of us in the entire family that know. Me, my mother, my father, and the cousin's parents. The girl and her sisters have no idea. Mine was finding out the woman I called mum for the first 16 years of my life was actually my gran, and that my older sister was my birth mom. Apparently, she got pregnant when she was 13, so her mom decided to raise me. Now, I've got no idea what to call either of them. Calling my big sister mum just feels weird. I found out while my uncle was on his deathbed that he had a secret family with adult children. Mind you, this is the classic drunk uncle who lived alone or just had a live-in girlfriend or wife from time to time, but came to every family function. Nobody knew. Not his sisters, not even his mother. We still dispute this family because when we did ask my uncle, he just said, it's not a big deal. What the heck? This isn't really about me, but rather a friend of mine. I think to this day he still doesn't know this. My mother's good friends with his mother, which is how we met. And one day his mother tells my mother that the man we've all believed to be his father isn't really his father. And even he, the supposed father, doesn't even know it. Because she was officially dating him back then, but was cheating on him with the real father of the child. She said the real father ended up dying before the child was ever born. I believe in a car accident. And so she raised the child as the son of the man who she would go on to marry, and later divorce. Earlier this last year, I was hit up by a guy on Facebook claiming to be my half-brother. Fast forward a bit, and it turns out to be true. I don't know the details of the hows and whys, as every story has multiple sides, but my twin brother and I have been raised our whole lives, 23 years, by a wonderful man whom is the biological father of our older brother. There was never any hint or doubt that our dad wasn't our biological father, and we were raised with the utmost love and care by him, even though he and my mother were divorced or separated throughout the entirety of our lives. My father even had a fiance leave him at one point because she was apparently unhappy that he was paying family support for kids that weren't technically of his biology. He really sacrificed a lot for us, and I couldn't have asked for a better dad. Hasn't changed much in my life, honestly, and I never had any real crisis of conscience or identity about it because, hey, that sounds about right given my family history. Nonetheless, I'd say that counts as a nice little twist. When my grandfather was on his deathbed, he was very much aware of what he was saying and doing. He talked to each of the family members that were there privately. When I went in to see him, we talked for what seemed to be hours, joking as if it was another one of our every other weekend camping trips. It was very strange to know he would just be a lifeless shell of what he used to be. He put his hand on the back of my neck and told me I was about to go through the toughest 4 years of my life and to not act on my depressive actions. I left the room confused and broken. He passed within half an hour. The next 4 years and counting have been hell. My immediate family found out my father had been cheating on my mother and just messed with our emotions and thoughts over the course of a year and a bit. I failed to get my high school diploma, so I started to work full time to pay for our home. Not as big of a plot twist as some of those on here, but his words kept me from doing some pretty extreme things. Lots of downer stories in this thread, so here's a slightly more fun plot twist. I've always loved choreography. I was never much of a dancer myself, but I loved ballet and musical theater growing up. It branched into other avenues too, like martial arts and animation, which led to me becoming a comic artist. I never had anyone in my family to really relate these passions to, until on his deathbed, my grandfather started telling me stories I never heard before, about being both a boxer and a dancer. It may not sound like a big plot twist, but believe me when I say it felt like one at the time. We became really good friends all of a sudden, and in his very last days on Earth. I was so glad to make that connection with him before he left. I found out just last week that all my life, my mother's been addicted to drugs and has been hiding her addiction from my sister and I as best she could. On top of that, every single night she takes sleeping pills. I also learned that her family's convincing her to lie to my father and continue her addiction instead of getting help, purely to spite my father. I'd always suspected my mother had a drug problem, but never brought it up. My sister is still in the dark, and I intend to keep it that way. For now, I'm just watching my mother slowly wither away. Not me, but a friend of mine in high school. So my friend was adopted when she was pretty young. Doesn't know any of her biological family. My friend is a typical high school girl. Likes to go to the mall and whatnot. Every time she's there, she gets guys hitting on her saying how they know her from somewhere or something like that. She doesn't think much of it. She's a cute girl, so it happens often enough everywhere. As time passes, she notices a bunch more people saying they know her at the mall and call her by a different name. She eventually gets talking to one person and they swear they know someone who looks exactly like her. Turns out she had a twin that was also adopted and they were separated at birth. I had always been told both my grandfathers had died before I was born, and I never felt like there was any reason to question it. Fast forward 20 years and suddenly a man who looks identical to my dad shows up. It's my granddad. Turned out he had an affair with my nan when they were both married to other people and she became pregnant with my dad. My parents separated a while ago and I never had actually seen their wedding photos. I finally found one and saw my mom in her wedding dress, but she was holding my older sister, who looked about 3, making me about 1, or at least born for that matter. I thought there was a family secret until my mom told me she'd married my dad before a judge, and this picture was from the actual ceremony, which took place years later. My wife has a large family, lots of aunts, uncles, great uncles, etc. Family reunion attendance numbers in the hundreds. So there was one of my wife's great aunts, Aunt Vita. She wasn't well known to the family, but a few decades after she died, my wife's cousin is doing some family history, and a story comes out. Turns out, Vita was, in her early life, a mortician's assistant. Then she was hired by the state in the late 1800s, early 1900s as a hangman's assistant, and then she got promoted. Apparently, she didn't do a lot of work. Hanging as a form of capital punishment was being phased out by the early 1900s. She still had her title and salary though. After she died in Minneapolis, she was buried there. Eventually, the family wanted her grave moved down to the family gravesite in Iowa. When they unearthed the coffin, the lid fell open and they discovered possibly the most disturbing thing about Aunt Vita's life: scratch marks on the inside of the lid. After reading this in my cousin's notes, my wife turned 3 shades of pale, calmed down a bit, and then said, "Well, that's karma." My grandfather's sister had a heart attack, and I was telling my mother that we should all do a check. This kind of thing tends to run in the family. At that point, my mother told me that my real grandfather wasn't the one we thought. Her biological father was a Jew who was deported to a lager during the fascist period in Italy, and my grandmother, pregnant at the time, never saw him again. This is also the reason why my grandmother during the war hid many Jew families in Venice, under the roof of her house where they lived in Campo Sant'Angelo, despite the danger of being arrested and deported as well. This is not really a plot twist, but a funny last word story. My grandpa never really watched the news, but he liked to stay informed on the things the kids are watching these days. So I would always tell him about the modern headlines and whatever everyone was talking about. I also started watching South Park with him, since it always dealt with what was happening at the time the episode was created. He liked the show a lot and we started watching it on Netflix. When he watched The Succubus, he couldn't stop laughing at Tree Fitty. And that was sort of our main joke. No one else in the family knew what the heck we were talking about. We would always randomly say he would need about Tree Fitty, and I would read him Reddit and 4chan stories that lead up to Tree Fitty jokes. In August of this year, I was told his lifelong habit of smoking caught up with him and his lung cancer was serious now. He could have gotten treated, but he didn't want to. He wanted to pass away in his home with his family and loved ones. When we talked for the last time, we did the usual crying and everything, but after I sort of stopped crying, hysterically he said, "I'm gonna need one last thing from you." Unsuspecting me asked him what he wanted, anything at all. And he said, "Tree Fitty," and fake died. I stared at him for about 30 seconds in confusion before he said, "Nah, I'm kidding. Go bring your sister in here." I love my grandpa.
People who have been on dead people's computers. Did you find anything you wish you hadn't?
Good friend of mine had a major stroke and went into a coma. Prognosis was not good and the family made plans. Since I was the one that knew about computers, they asked me to go through his stuff and find pictures for his memorial service. 2 laptops and 10 USB sticks later, I wanted to bleach out my eyes. My friend was a great guy, but he was morbidly obese. Apparently he had been renting out escorts and such from online forums. They were far from pretty, and thankfully, my friend only appeared in a few pictures, but had his clothes on. Out of about 10 gigabytes worth of images, I was able to find 5 suitable for his memorial service. The toughest part was telling his family that I could only salvage 5 photos. I told them the hard drives were corrupted. Yep, I wiped them. No sense in letting them know what I found. On a positive note, I did adopt his parrot, and till this day, she keeps calling me by his name.
I'm disappointed we did not get a name for the parrot, and I would also be pretty traumatized if I discovered my friend's USB stick full of all of his finagling with ladies of the night. Turns out my brother was writing a novel and a ton of poetry. I always wonder if we should do something with it. I'm not sure how completed it all is, but my cousin who went through it said it was quite a bit of material. I'll seriously look into doing something with this now. I'm not sure if I'll be back in the US until this late summer, but I'll see if my cousin can upload the files somewhere next time she's at my parents' house. There are also piles and piles of notebooks and journals. Again, I'm assuming are his poetry and short story collections. He told me that's what he was writing in the notebooks. Those would take a while to go through since it is all handwritten. At any rate, he was a bit of a recluse for about 8 years prior to his death. He also had some severe substance abuse problems and an anxiety disorder. So the content/background for his work might be interesting if it gives insight on what was going on during that time. My mom said something that he was looking for a publisher at one point, so it is probably what he would have wanted for some of his works. I have no idea what the brother was writing, obviously, but I think that it's a very nice gesture in a way to honor a dead family member, to find a way to publish that work to some degree, and maybe even that work could go on to inspire someone else in the future in a positive way. A few months after my wife passed away, suddenly, I finally got around to cleaning out her PC and laptop. I'd barely gotten started when I came across a file that had its file associations removed. She did all the financial stuff, so I had to find out if it was something important. Of course, my first try was a Word document, and sure enough, it loaded. Yeah, it wasn't financial. Turns out she'd written a list of lifetime goals that she wanted to reach, and it had been updated only weeks before she passed. A list of about 30 things she'd dream of doing, and only about 4 or 5 were crossed off. I didn't get much done after that. So I tried to find the file again per people's request, but I was not able to locate the file. I'm not sure what I did with it. Drank away most of my memory of that time, to be honest. But off the top of my head, I remember some of the more mundane things on the list. She wanted to buy a house, travel the world, start her own YouTube channel. I remember the most recent update was that she'd crossed off wanting to meet Alton Brown, which she did at a book signing just a short while before it happened. I remember she made sure to bring her nutmeg with her in case he asked. That would probably make me profoundly sad if I found that, but I would also hold the hope that they felt the same way as the dead wife from Up did, the whole "you were my adventure." Also, I have no idea who Alton Brown is, but apparently there's some kind of American TV host chef personality.
Not on the computer, but my family found a 3-ring binder my grandmother kept. It was full of lusty love letters. We asked one of her best friends about it, and she replied with, "Oh yeah, I was supposed to burn that." Apparently my grandma and this guy had a relationship where they never actually got together, but had a lot of frisky phone conversations. None of that is quite so bad, I guess, unless you start imagining that it was your grandma. She described many details of their talks in her letters and referred to it all as her year of passion.
God damn, Grandma. Good for you, though, girl. You do you, man. Just, damn. My father died a few years ago from colon cancer. Even though I was only 19, my brother was significantly younger when we lost him. He was 7. My father and brother would watch a movie usually every other night. And a few months ago, I finally got around to cleaning his computer. I looked through his folder where he downloaded movies to, and the last film he downloaded was Spirited Away. And it was the night before he passed away. Needless to say, we watched it together that night. Good film, definitely fits the story and the whole, theme of death we got going on in this subject, but I'm more of a Porco Rosso guy when it comes down to Studio Ghibli films. That one is my absolute favorite. TLDR, Dead Brother's computer, possible self-deletion. Wish that I hadn't found that he had already erased his computer history. When I was 18, I took my older brother's computer after he died in a car crash. He was the sort of guy that people loved to be around, always laughing, joking. He made people feel good about themselves. His car had run into a grouping of those cement jersey barriers on a road under construction. No other cars were involved and there were no signs that he had hit the brakes. He must have dozed off. While emptying his room in his house, we found a set of crumpled papers. They were the unfinished first sentences of self-deletion notes. But he never left a completed note, and instead chose to throw these drafts away. Maybe he sat down to write a note, decided he didn't want to die, needed some air, went for a drive, got into an accident. I couldn't understand how this happy, great guy that I loved could be so unhappy. So I searched his computer for any clues. I was prepared to look in every corner for a clue, an internet history, an AIM log. This was back in the day. A photo, an email, anything. There was nothing. Not just nothing strange. Nothing at all. He had already wiped his computer clean, probably anticipating that his little brother would inherit his computer and snoop around. It still doesn't confirm or deny anything for me. I feel certain that he intended to go through with it, but I've never been more upset to find absolutely nothing. Man, I completely understand why that would be, conflicting in a way, man.
TLDR, priceless memories, creepy smut. Oh good, this story. So my uncle took buttloads of pictures just all the damn time. We didn't actually realize the scale of this until I had to look through them all after he died. Turns out we could have lost every single picture of me, my sister, my cousins, and still we'd have a remarkably smooth transition from infant to adult in picture form. That said, we also discovered he liked smut. So much smut. And since we didn't want to accidentally throw away some priceless picture, I had to go through 3 hard drives and a couple hundred USBs and CDs of almost entirely smut. Now I was more impressed with his capacity to find and organize things than anything else. 4 gigabytes of name time-stamped videos and pictures of trans women with freakishly large breast implants urinating on men. We have the USB for that right this way.
I'm just gonna say, they said themselves that this uncle who died was a very organized individual. I'm sure they would have separated that stuff from those things. And honestly, it's at a certain point, morbid curiosity is all the excuse you need. It's if I found that, I'd be like, okay, how deep does this rabbit hole go? But hey, I ain't judging.
That's a goddamn lie. I'm judging everything.
My boss passed away in his sleep just over a year ago. He was young and it was unexpected. I helped his boss get into his computer at work and also his laptop from home to retrieve insurance, banking, investments, etc. information for my boss's family. It was very eerie in that I found my boss had a lot of the same tastes in music, TV shows, movies, etc. that I had. Visited the same websites, etc. I felt like he and I could have become much better friends if there'd been more time. I ended up getting almost everything for them. There are a couple of Excel files with financials that were password protected. I ran some brute force programs against them for a few weeks, but eventually my boss had me shut it down and then it was over. And so now I sit at his desk on his computer using his mouse and his keyboard and do his job. I like to think he's out there somewhere, watching over me and that he'd be happy with what I've done in the last year. I hope so at any rate. This one is a little odd because either he already respected the crap out of his boss and then found out about their common interests, but it seems more like in the way that they wrote it. Like I said, there's a lot of context probably missing from this, so don't take me as a hard truth or anything. But it seems like upon finding out that they had a lot more in common than they realized, he formed a parasocial relationship with a dead man. 9 years ago, not a personal computer, but my local library has a set of computers in there and people can get usernames and passwords and use the virtual desktops, given they have a library card. This old guy would use the computers a lot. I wasn't nosy, so I never looked in depth, but he was using a word processor, so I assumed he was typing letters or something similar. Anyway, I volunteered there over the summer and I had to close out inactive library cards, or ones that had paid dues. Basically, this meant I was deleting accounts by logging onto their virtual desktop and cleaning them out. The old man showed up in the lineup. Turns out he died a few months before. I opened up his desktop and went to documents because curiosity got the better of me and I wanted to see if he had anything some relatives wanted or something. There was his life, encompassed in 2 folders. Folder 1, novel. He was writing a memoir of his tales in World War II. Folder 2, Missy Missy. From what I could collect, was his wife. In it were dozens, if not over 100 documents of love poems and letters to her. I backed them up on a USB and intended to return them to his wife. I'm sure she would want the love letters. As it were, the wife was dead and he was buried next to her in the cemetery. I was sad, because these were letters to his long-dead wife. She had died in 2004. I gave the files to his son, who read them out loud at the old man's annual memorial mass as a eulogy and testimony to the love of his wife. Well, it might have made you sad, but it made me happy, because guess what? The greatest thing you can have is a love that transcends the bounds of life and death. My girlfriend and I used to play Pokemon a lot. I still do, actually. But she passed away in a car accident a year ago. One day I opened up one of her games because I was feeling down and I noticed her main player was named after me and all her Pokemon were nicknames after pet names we gave each other. The thing is, I did the same thing in my game, but we never told each other. Short and sweet, I love it, but it vaguely, ever so vaguely reminds me of the Animal Crossing comic about the dead mother. Absolutely melts my frickin' heart. God, look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about. No, but I got an old computer from church once. They upgraded and donated it to us. It was filled with horse smut. I don't go to that church anymore. I say, may the Lord have mercy on the horse smut-loving heathen that resided in that there church.
Well, I sometimes help out at a charity that ensures ladies of the night have access to condoms and can reach out to police if they suffer violence, etc. At one point, we threw a fundraiser that sold art created by a former or occasional lady of the night and showcased the art of one deceased woman in particular, who I believe was about to begin transitioning to a man. I was given her hard drive through a friend of the family that worked in the organization and asked to retrieve what I could of her art and her life. My memory is a little fuzzy on most of this, but I think her death happened in the early 2000s. She had a fairly large Napster directory, and I think it was a Windows XP machine. To be honest, I don't think I found anything I wish I hadn't. Instead, I found a trove of beautiful art and a small window into someone's life. She was both a hobbyist and a professional photographer who had a webcam she made good use of. I saw her travels to India and South America. I saw friends of all shapes and sizes, mainly muscular and heavy tattooed, and action shots of her and her girlfriend. She had an active social life, and in most ways, she was just like the rest of us. I feel odd typing it, but I would have felt very voyeuristic if she were still alive. As it were, I didn't worry much about it and instead thought of it as a very serious responsibility. I guess ultimately I found a reminder that even people who do work that's derided or considered dehumanizing by some still lead normal and wonderful lives just like the rest of us, with the same struggles and joys and trials and tribulations. I'm glad I got to experience it.
Why did I give you such a doofy voice? Whatever, this next one's kind of depressing. TLDR, found my grandfather's writing on how much he hated my grandmother. When my grandfather passed away, we were going through his computer to save off important things. We mostly saved off genealogy information, but found one very strange item. My grandfather had written a book/thesis on how much he hated my grandmother. It was about 150 pages long, had a table of contents, and all sorts of hate-filled stories and anecdotes. My dad shared it with one of his brothers, and they waited about 5 years before showing it to my grandmother. I'm still not 100% certain that she ever needed to know about that book. One of my family members printed it out and mailed it to all of my aunts and uncles. My dad is one of 7. It was a huge drama fest for years. It seemed to have died down lately, though. 150 pages. A table of contents entirely dedicated to your hatred for presumably your wife. My God, the hatred in this man's heart is unfathomable. It is so strangely cruel and yet oddly sensible at the same time. I mean, he didn't murder her or anything. And plus the question is, was she bad? Was she so bad that it was warranted that he wrote this book? Just my God, this strange and yet beautiful world we live in. What the hell? Made a throwaway for this. This is my first time posting on Reddit. I had to get this off my chest. I knew my father had a vibrant internet life. He had been in IRC for a long time, maybe starting in like 1996. He had been a regular on the one channel for about 10 years. I think he was a mod or whatever the equivalent was. He talked about his online friends a lot. They seemed like great people and they were supportive when he got sick. After he died, I wanted to make sure they knew, but I wasn't sure how to get in touch with them. About 6 months after he died, I got a Facebook message. The sender said they were looking for a woman with my same last name who lived in my town. She was a regular in their chat and had cancer, and they were worried about her. Approximately my father's age with the same kind of dog. The dog picture he sent was not my father's dog, but it looked similar and a photo of my father's very distinctive truck. After being in some shock, I realized that my father was doing some serious catfishing. He had posed as this woman for over a decade. Honestly, she sounded nicer than my father in a lot of ways. He sometimes had a major temper and could be a total butthole. This group of people really loved this woman in their community. I didn't know what to tell this guy. I wanted to tell the truth, they deserved closure, but if I lied and said she died, it would raise questions. Why was there no obituary, etc.? I did not want them to feel betrayed either. After thinking for a few days, I told him. He seemed really confused, but honestly not terribly upset. He said that he was sorry for my loss and hoped I would visit the chat sometime. We would keep the secret between us and he would tell the group that she died, but not the whole truth. I think this was the best way to handle it, but sometimes I regret it. I don't know what my dad would have wanted. Strange yet beautiful world we live in. Seriously, kids, be careful who you talk to online. You have no idea who you're talking to at any point on the internet. It could be anyone with any intention. They could just be messing with you for an entire decade for no other reason than just because they can. I don't know. I am honestly just shocked that this person, the online chat friend of the father, took it as well as they did. I would have to go away for like 10 minutes and process and then reply maybe.
Yeah, my uncle's laptop. We powered one up and there were all these weird selfies taken from overhead with him lying on his back. He was a gargantuan old shut-in / hoarder, so they looked really weird. And then there were all these hardcore twink smut videos and stills. This was odd because he had always been straight to my knowledge and kind of a homophobe. Yeah, I know, it should have been a red flag. And then it hit me. He was taking selfies to put himself in the picture, so to speak. Decades too late to be a twink. He was an old man trying to imagine he was young, beautiful, and able to explore something he couldn't have done in 1950s Texas. Before he died, he had become fixated on a couple of memories of friends coming on to him in swimming pools, etc. I now understand that he was fantasizing about missed opportunities to have fun. There was also an account for some kind of meetup site for guys. All old guys. I had to email the site and tell them this man is dead. We don't have a charger for the other laptop. I don't know what we'll find on it.
Utterly traumatizing. I don't know why I dedicated myself to such a stressful voice there. I was kind of trying to go for like the old lady, the wrinkly like stick of an old lady in the chocolate episode of SpongeBob, I guess. Anyway, I would be exceedingly careful about opening that second laptop. You might get Raiders of the Lost Ark if you open it. Several years ago, a distant relative died and left their computer password protected. My grandma gave the computer to me and said that if I could pull everything off the hard drive and give it to his wife, he had a lot of finances and other important stuff on there, I could keep the computer. So I set to work, ended up just writing a script to brute force it since I had tried every combination of birthdays, pets, etc. I could think of, and my script found the correct password after 3 days. I find what one would normally expect: finances, a ton of family pictures, assorted documents for work, some fairly tame erotica. Now you might be thinking that's what disturbed me, the fairly tame erotica. No, actually. What disturbed me was that I found in a subfolder of a folder on his desktop labeled 2001 resume. In that folder was about 11 gigabytes of lolicon smut. Keep in mind this was like 2008, so that's quite a bit. I searched the rest of the computer and found no trace of real CP, so I just ignored it since lolly is more or less legal. Didn't see any reason to drop this on the rest of the family, so I omitted it from the copy I made for them. Kept a few DVDs of the stuff though in case it ever came out that he had graped minus the G a kid or something and nuked the drive. Considering I was like 11 during all of this, holy crap, that was a shock to see. I'm aware I said earlier that, yeah, I would look at stuff out of morbid curiosity if I was there, but as a rule, I would generally rather not be the go-to guy to go through a dead relative or anyone who's dead's old laptop files and stuff. I just don't want to be in that situation. Also, what was up with the 11-year-old genius? A relative of mine, 40M, told me this story. His roommate in university was a very quiet person. Several years ago, his roommate got into an accident. He lost pretty much 10 years of memory. One day, my cousin found a USB belonging to his roommate in his bag. He phoned said roommate's parents. The parents decided to come and pick up the USB. My cousin, not being able to resist temptation, looked through the files. He found plans for a self-deletion note, a journal about the roommate's depression, and draft of a very sorrowful please come back letter to said roommate's former girlfriend. My cousin, looking at the joyous, blissful, loving post-memory loss picture of roommate, straight up formatted the USB. My cousin told me that he believed that his roommate would be better off without these memories. Now that is a juicy goddamn story. Now I gotta say, I've always been kind of like, is long-term amnesia really a thing? I'm sure it is, but it's one of those things where because I haven't experienced it personally, there's just a degree of skepticism I have towards the whole concept where it's like, really? The memories are just gone? It's not like they're in little glass containers that shatter and then the memory dissipates into the air and up into the goddamn stratosphere and it's gone forever. It's somewhere in your noggin, you just can't freaking remember it. I don't know, it's a weird thing. It's so hard to explain because I don't freaking have it. Hopefully you understand what I mean though, in terms of the skepticism of it. If someone told me they had amnesia, my immediate conclusion would be they're screwing with me. This was such a weird, funny topic to do. I mean, all the people's actions, I have to question some of their reasonings for keeping some stuff and looking at things and whatnot, but what a funny one to do.
What's your best "fire me, I freaking dare you" moment from work? Worked for a newspaper, editing and actually putting the paper together, arranging it all, placing stories and pictures where they need to be, titling, quoting, and sourcing everything. I was a one-man team and used an overly complicated system that I figured out how to use really effectively. They treated me like garbage, set impossible deadlines, and berated me for not meeting them. One day, the boss tells me to fully complete a paper by the end of the day. Gave me no warning, I had no articles from the journalists, and no photos from photographers. It was my job to collect it all from everyone, and he wants me to do it in a single day? I told him no. If he wants it done, he has to give me more time. He tells me if I don't have it done by the end of the day, I'm fired. I tell him that this paper can't function without me. He tells me I need to take the day off and cool my temper, and that he'll do my job for me. I get a call an hour after I get home, and that he needs me to come in and do it, and I can have as much time as I need, promptly quit on that rumphole, forget your stinky newspaper. Worked a job where I was the only one who knew how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. I had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I didn't step up, I would be fired, or else they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night, I took apart all the equipment, weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned my phone off after getting home for the entire day, as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day, I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then text saying I risked being fired, then text begging me to return, then more text trying to compromise with OT, then an apology before nothing else for the rest of the day. Other than that, the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. Came in the next day, and over half the stuff was still not put together, and what had been put together was put together haphazardly, and would need to be taken out again, then put back in correctly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office, I told them that if they weren't there to apologize, then just fire me, or drop it and let me put the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. That's so crazy to me. So legitimately, this guy, your boss, was like, I can't believe it. You're just so lazy because no one else here knows how to put these machines back together. Why are you so lazy? As the kids say it, that's cap. When I was 17, I worked a summer holiday job at Pizza Hut. I had transferred my hometown restaurant from my university town restaurant. I was there for 5 weeks and hadn't been paid yet. The jerkhead boss claimed it was because I gave him the wrong employee number. I hadn't. Anyway, after 5 weeks of no pay, I rang him on New Year's Eve, i.e. busiest night of the summer, and said I wasn't coming to work because I wasn't a volunteer and I wasn't going to work for free. He told me if I didn't go to work, I may as well not come back as I would be fired. I didn't go to work and I had a fun New Year's instead. Then a few days later, I called the employment tribunal. I'm in New Zealand, and told them what had happened. They called my jerkhead boss. He then called me, offered me my job back, and was nice as a pie for the rest of the summer. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third-level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes, made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, QA and production testing. That just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused. The CIO overruled me. 72 hours later, phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming. And the CIO called phone conference after phone conference, demanding timelines for when I was going to get this crap fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally, I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake, I would need to get off the freaking phone, go work with my teams, and the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their bums. But we would all happily go together. 24 hours later, QA and my team had the cow crap cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for QA production testing. I wish I could say that was the only worst time. Husband was having his gallbladder taken out and was having complications before surgery. I needed to leave from work for about 2 hours, and my boss threw a fit, stating I couldn't leave. I told her I had 300 hours of sick time I can use for myself and my husband, and if she wanted to push, I'd take all of it at once, leaving no one but her to do my job. She said she'd fire me if I tried. I just looked at her and said, I have to go. I'll send you my doctor's note. I wasn't fired. I was actually awarded that year for job performance. I didn't take all 300 hours. I just threatened to since I was protected by FMLA. I only took the day off. I don't know if anyone else got that vibe when she said, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. It was such a CSI moment, just, I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. Anyway, you tell them. You tell that boss. Yeah. Over the first year I worked there, I essentially took over most of the tasks in my department, which were previously held by other departments and was done badly because of it. This led to a massive increase in productivity. I then found out I was paid significantly less than what others were making and others in my position across the industry were making. So I go to my boss and tell them I had done all this work, increasing productivity, and I would like to discuss a raise. They said no. Okay. So I worked there for another year, asking for a raise every now and again, until I was offered a job that paid double. It didn't start for a couple months, so I held on to that job until I was set to submit my 2 weeks. I asked for a raise again, thinking, what the hell, why not? My boss goes off, tells me I won't get a raise, and says some very colorful things about it. It culminated with her telling me, if you don't like your pay, maybe we should evaluate your future at this company. To which I replied, already have. I took another job and this was your last chance to offer me what I deserve. I quit and walked out of that office. Friends told me that my sudden departure caused a massive backup of work that ended with my manager being fired for it. Ah, c'est la vie. Do I love stories like that? Ah, that lady. What a jerk. Worked for Radio Shack and always butted heads with the district manager. He wanted me to use these ridiculous sales techniques that might work in a big city, but were really pushy. The year he became our DM, I won a contest for best salesman in the whole company out of about 14,000 employees, and I did it without being pushy and forcing stuff on people. He still tried to get me to use these ridiculous techniques each month when he would visit, but after I won the contest, I stopped sugarcoating it and would flat out tell him, that's stupid. I'm not going to do it that way. I was a summer teacher at one of those Korean SAT prep schools that hired U.S. college students for a summer, and then promptly worked them to death. Although I will admit, the pay was pretty good. We taught 8:30 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. with an hour lunch, but had homework to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching SAT math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them that I didn't know much chemistry, but they insisted. So I worked my backside off refreshing myself on all the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class. One day in the middle of this, I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I couldn't come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, so how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you've missed? Excuse me? Well, we didn't have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class an hour for the first week, aka teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why didn't you have a sub teach my class? Then they messed up and said, we don't have a sub. Well then no, I'm not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. We'll fire you, and then you won't get your plane ticket reimbursed, they replied. Go ahead. First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you don't have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you're going to lose all those students that I'm teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the plane ticket will cost me. This was about 5 to 6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there was going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months, and I'm still doing this job that pays around $50,000 a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me that there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise and get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait. 3 months. 4 months. Then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the WM telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me for things that were beyond my control and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, I make $11 an hour doing this job ex-boss told me he got paid $50K a year to do. I don't need this crap. Give me a raise or I won't be back. I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I'm met by WM and Ops Manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing and are putting me on a salary starting at $45K since ex-boss was there longer. I negotiated up to $48K. I was working in a restaurant. Already knew I was sick, but our managers were rumpholes, and I knew if I called in, they'd be extremely upset. Showed up to work around 8, and by 9 a.m. I knew I wasn't going to last for the rest of the day. Managers still made me stay. Around 9:30, I was pre-bussing my tables, and just the sight of half-eaten food pushed me over the edge. I managed not to get sick and hold it until I got to the dishwashing area, but then upchucked in a trash can immediately after putting my plates down. A coworker saw me and vouched for me when I went to tell my manager I was leaving for the doctor. He said, "Even with the doctor's note, if you leave work today, you'll be fired." I said, "You have human waste in a kitchen trash can and haven't even done anything about it. It's on camera. I'm leaving." Showed up for work a few days later and didn't hear anything about it. Ended up quitting a few weeks later for a job at a couple considerably higher scale restaurants. I worked in a deli several years ago while I was a university student, and one time I caught bronchitis and a wicked eye infection at the same time. I tried calling a few people to see if we could trade shifts for the week. Nobody answered their phone, to no one's surprise. So I called my boss instead and told her what was going on. She replied back saying my health is not her concern and that if I'm not showing up, I need to find someone to cover. Just so I understand, I have an infection on top of having bronchitis. I am on antibiotics and can barely function properly, and you expect me to come in and operate slicing machinery because nobody wants to take my shift. Trying to articulate this without coughing was difficult, but I managed it. Correct. My body decided that now was the perfect time to have a coughing fit, which my boss heard through the phone, and that prompted her to say, you know what? Maybe you should stay home this week. I hated that place. It's not like we were ever understaffed. If anything, we were always overstaffed. But freak me if I tried trading shifts with someone else for health reasons. I've had to cancel appointments because of this crap. I got out a few months after the bronchitis incident. I was elbows deep in an AT&T Unix machine that should have been replaced a decade before. Parts strewn all over a desk when the client came in to see what was taking me so long. You've got 3 dead fans. One of the power supplies has failed. There's a bad CMOS battery, and the video card is glitchy and refusing to allow the machine to post sometimes. So how long is that going to take? 15 minutes? I could patch things up in a couple of hours, but I'm going to have to come back in a few days with new parts. If you can't fix it in the next half hour, you're fired. I'll find someone that knows what they're doing. I stood up, grabbed my tools, and started walking. Where are you going? I told you how long it would take. That's longer than a half hour, so I guess I'm fired. My firing lasted about 3 more steps towards the door. 2004. Worked at a municipality department. One day the programmers update the work PCs and block pretty much everything and anything. No internet at all. No authorization for installing anything. All games removed from Windows. They even removed the calculator function for some reason. Then the supervisors started moving coworkers around and my entire team was dispersed across a gigantic building for no reason. We were the top team in terms of results. The supervisors simply hated our guts for some reason. So me and one of my coworkers tried to devise some way to have communication without having to travel for 5 minutes each time, across the building and down the floor, just to get to each other's desk and ask a simple yes or no question. We do this during our lunch break. Our supervisor interrupts and asks what we're doing. We explain we're trying to save time and maximize communication and results. The supervisor, who doesn't like us anyway, says we should get back to work and quit trying to communicate through unauthorized means. Okay, we simply stopped trying to install Messenger on our phones. One day later, the supervisor is looking for my coworker. I don't know where he is. I say so. Well, then contact him through your Messenger program. The one you told us to quit installing? Yes. We gave up on that. On your orders. She tried to get me fired for refusing to obey basic orders. I explained the situation to her superior. He let me get back to work and told me to ignore her from then on. I moved to a better post a few months later because she made my life unbearable from that day on. And I finally went and told the upper floor they'll either move me elsewhere or I quit. As I was studying in Paris, I also worked night shifts in a hotel near the Hôtel de Ville district. I worked from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. several nights in a row. The hotel was very busy as it was a very touristic area, so getting 4 hours of sleep over the total 4 to 5 nights was usual. It happened several times a week that the hotel manager simply forgot to relieve me in the morning, so I'd be falling asleep on the counter as they came 2 or 3 hours late. When I politely remarked that I'm tired and they're late again, he'd simply laugh it off and say, I guess we forgot about you. Finally, I decided to pass a job interview for some other work that essentially happened during the day, so I'd finally sleep my nights. When I found out that they accepted me in that new job, I waited until my shift should have started that Friday evening and phoned that manager waiting for me to relieve him at the desk. Oh, hello, I just called to say that I got a new job from next Monday, so I'm not coming tonight, nor ever. What do you... But you cannot! Why didn't you say something sooner? I guess I forgot about you. I used to work at a small family-owned grocery store for a few years. We got our load in on Mondays and Thursdays, and we got passed over one Monday, and the distributor said we'd get the missing load in on Thursday. So what essentially happened was a double load, and my 2 receiving partners were out sick. I was the only person in the warehouse receiving at the time and got to take on 15 plus pallets of groceries that needed to hit the shelves immediately. I was specifically told to not go up front and to do what I could while the front end crew covered the aisles and cash registers. Well, a lot of them were either lazy, untrained, or just putting in their hours so they could pay bills. I put in my earbud, just one, and get to work. I'm halfway through checking the pallets when I get called up front. So I ignore it and continue. Then I get called in again. So I head up there and get yelled at by a new hire with a bad attitude to do your job and bag for me. The customer was a regular and we got along very well. And she told me that she was fine and could bag her own groceries. Between the customer and the fact that I wasn't having it, I walked away. I had 3 years and 2 ranks on her. So I didn't give half a crap and went back to my pallets. Then I get the newest hotshot manager who replaced the old hotshot manager who replaced the beloved manager who trained basically the whole store, in my face about having an earbud in on the clock, which is allowed as long as you have one ear free, and said I could be sent home and not come back if I wanted to listen to music. So I gestured to the pallets and said, go for it. These all need to be checked in and broken down. Have fun. I got to keep my earbud in. So I had that going for me, which was nice.
What is something that happened at a sleepover which you'll never forget? My friend got an inappropriate text from his mom that was meant for her boyfriend. It specifically said the boyfriend's name in it, so I'm certain it wasn't anything weird. The look on his face and the graphic detail in the text was the funniest freaking thing I've ever witnessed. I couldn't fall asleep because I was laughing for hours. It's always fun to get those types of texts from people, but never when it's your mom. I feel bad for this person. We were all around 8 to 10 years old, and it's about 11 p.m. after spending all day with the birthday boy's aunt, his legal guardian. We were watching Wild Wild West when out of nowhere, one of the boys says to my friend's aunt, "You have great knockers." She said thank you, and we all continued watching the movie. That kid went on to be a Giga Chad. First time I ever saw spicy content was at a sleepover, and it totally blew my mind. I had no idea that there was a whole world of spicy possibilities beyond, like, awkwardly touching my pillow. Hey now, the anime body pillow business is booming. This may have happened to a friend of mine. I was the first one in the group to get a computer in our bedrooms. I became, an expert in surfing the internet. Well, one night, Chris came over and I showed him LimeWire. To this day, he swears he went to bed, but when I went to sleep, he was watching, and when I woke up, he was watching. With his bloodshot eyes, he left my house, not as a boy, but as a man. A man who probably spanked the monkey on my computer chair. Gross. LimeWire, the website where you always downloaded the wrong version of the show you wanted. When I was about 7 years old, my friend and I stayed up pretty late watching TV. We came across some weird infomercial channel that was advertising body paint. All of a sudden, unclothed women pop up on the screen and these men started rubbing green paint all over their bodies. It then cut to an unclothed man that was wrapped in a plastic blanket that had the air sucked out of it. The women threw themselves on top of him and started rubbing their bodies on him. I got so paranoid that my friend's mom would walk in from the next room, but my friend was so intrigued by whatever the hell was that, and she dismissed all my pleas. I still have no idea what the heck we were watching. You were watching Real Hooking Up on HBO. That was the episode about people that like latex. Dude, watching something on late night HBO was my first experience too. I just remember it being a hot Asian woman and I was like, wow! I was around 7 years old. I had a rich friend named Kevin who could afford all sorts of cool toys because his dad imported and exported them, along with a bunch of other goods. During one sleepover, he brought over one of these remote control fart boxes. Instead of playing with it, we hatched a master plan to sneak it under my parents' bed and unleash its power when they were going to bed. We waited for hours. Finally, when the clock struck midnight, we let it loose. God damn it, Alan, my mother said. But it wasn't over. We didn't spam it. We waited for them to settle and let it go again and again. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore. My parents had us cracking up, and my dad, as boisterous with his cologne as he is, realized it wasn't his butt. I used to be best friends with a popular girl at school, and our group of friends had sleepovers all the time. One night when we were 12 years old, I woke up all wet and she convinced me that it was really hot and we had just sweated all night. Then I started to think about the plastic cover on her bed and the frequent sheet changes, and it all made sense. She had peed the bed, and well, me too. Okay, not a sleepover technically, but more of a trip. My class went to a trip away and the boys slept in one room and the girls in another. Now, on one of the last days of this week-long trip, one of the boys in my class decided it would be a great idea for all of us to play together at the same time. So a group of 17 boys playing furiously in their sleeping bags was one of the most what the freak am I doing moments in my life, and that is a moment that I'll never forget. Also, at a school ski trip one year, there would be speed playing basically every evening of the week. I still don't know how we came up with this idea that finishing fast was the goal to aim for, or if it was really necessary to show the tissue as proof. But well, at least we had separate beds this time. In hindsight, the whole thing did feel less awkward than it probably should have. Bro, what? At our school, there was a big bunch of us guys. Not exactly all friends, but good friends who had other friends that hung out with them. An extended circle of about 40 mates. One guy, Stuart, was a bit dim. Not amazingly so, just slightly lower than average. He wasn't actually my friend, but we'd talk, played football, and walked home together, but never went out of the way to hang out. Anyways, whilst waiting someplace, we were talking and he told me that there was a game that a few guys played, Soggy Biscuit. The aim was to put a soggy biscuit on a post. After someone calls the start, they'd get their members out and, well, the last one to finish had to eat the soggy biscuit. He then asked if I wanted to go and do it. I said no. Many years later, I'm in a pub and there is Stu, when we start talking and having a few drinks. After a few pints, I asked him if he had any soggy biscuits lately and we had a laugh. He thanked me for not telling others about it and not dropping him as a mate. He then tells me, I loved playing Soggy Biscuit. Most of the time, I used to lose just so I could eat it. Then he says, I used to kick up a fuss about eating it. Later on, I'd refuse to eat it and the others would hold me down and force the biscuit into my mouth. I asked you to join us because I wanted your Soggy Biscuit, and I still do. Here's my number. He then shaked my hand and left. I never called him, but I do wonder if anyone of the extended group joined him. Stu had no chill, and I actually got some more information about him. He got married to a girl, had a baby with her, got caught cheating with a man, and she kicked him out. Months later, she had the kid, but he wasn't allowed to see it. She lives in a terraced house, long row of attached houses with no front garden. He drives by the house to try to look into the windows to see the baby, sees it, gets excited, floors his flatbed truck and crashes into 3 parked cars, gets out and runs off. One of those cars belonged to a mutual friend's brother, who sees him running off and calls the cops. He ends up getting banned from driving, but does start to be able to see his kid. And they got back together. Okay, I thought the previous story was bad, but again, bro, what? Also, where was the sleepover? When I was 7 years old, me and my best friend had heard gunshots outside of his house late one night. It wasn't a completely unusual occurrence, so we didn't think much of it until we went outside the morning after and found his dog had been hit by one of the bullets. Family friends moved to a farm in rural Wisconsin because they thought living on a farm would be fun. The high school kids would drive around the county getting wasted and shooting people's dogs. Because, you know, country folk are normal people. Luckily, their dog only had their leg blown off. When they were finally caught, they had killed over 25 dogs and injured a bunch more. That's some psychopathic stuff right there. You think that's weird? When I was in the 8th grade, a new kid joined in the middle of the year. He was all kinds of awkward. He liked to wear pink shirts and talk about dissecting animals. Someone called him on his apparent BS and found out that he had been catching birds and squirrels to mess with. They straight up told the school on him, so they searched his house and found a crap ton of dead animals, including birds wrapped in duct tape, that were still alive when he did it. I just don't get how messed up people can get. I used to light popsicle sticks on fire and drop them in the tub. Real tough kid I was. Okay, well, I just want to say I hope those country kids got shown the country justice after hurting those dogs. As for that last kid, I'm pretty sure that's how the show Dexter started off. The serial killer, not the laboratory. When I was a kid, my mom had a friend who would always bring her son over to hang out. Anyways, they arranged a sleepover for us that he was especially stoked about. So when it's lights out, he almost immediately starts crying. He kept saying my mom wanted a girl over and over. I'm still not sure what the hell happened. Staying the night at a friend's house with a bunch of our buddies, when we were all in our mid-teens. We're all sleeping on the floor in this large room, fairly spaced apart, almost zero light. The slightly older sister of a friend whose house it was had been flirting with one of the guys all night, and while we were asleep, she snuck into the room. I think I was the only one still awake. From what I could make out in the darkness, she crawled over to the guy she had been flirting with, slid under his blankets, and got on top of him and started doing stuff. He had the biggest grin on his face the next morning and would answer, "I'm just happy to be here with you guys," whenever asked. I was in preschool and was sleeping at a friend's house down the street with my sister. In the middle of the night, I woke up to screaming and glass shattering, so I got out of bed and followed the noise into the lounge room. His parents were screaming at each other, and when they saw me, the mother came running over and pushed me into the bedroom and shut the door. Not something I'll forget anytime soon. A friend's mom and her fella started doing the deed when they thought everyone was asleep. I wasn't. His mom thought she was being quiet. She wasn't, and being a 14-year-old boy, I could not help but, do the needful thing. Dude, I was over at my friend's for a sleepover one time when I was like 11, and his parents just started going at it in the bedroom next door. It's like 7 p.m., and they have like 6 kids, and they're all awake. My friend just looks at me and casually says, "Mom, please," and then goes back to playing video games. I actually had a similar moment when I had to apartment sit for my brother one time, and his neighbor was definitely having a good night from what I could hear. She sounded kind of hot too. When I was younger, I spent the night at a friend's house for her birthday. All the other girls were asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I was bored, so I went to the bathroom and started playing with her mom's makeup and hair care products. What's the worst that could happen, right? Well, I got a chunk of my coarse, curly hair stuck in a hairbrush. I could not for the life of me get it out. I was too afraid to go rummaging around in the kitchen for scissors because I didn't want to wake up the other girls. So I tried pulling really hard and ripped out my hair. A full chunk of hair about 3 inches wide. I pulled it all out, crying silently the whole time, and then spent the rest of the night picking my hair out of the hairbrush with blood rolling down my forehead. It was traumatic. My conclusion? Sleepovers are dangerous. Once I had a friend over and he puked what looked like a gallon of mashed potatoes in my bed and blamed it on my 15-pound dog who was locked up in his kennel. Stupid Brad. I was about 8 or 9 years old at my mate's house watching The Exorcist. My mate's dad thought it would be funny to go outside and lift the window shutter and scream through the window. It was freaking terrifying. I wet the bed at a friend's house one time. The next morning, I told him that I grabbed some lemonade from the fridge in the middle of the night and spilled the whole cup. I was like 8, and they didn't have lemonade. Another kid and I got into the same sleeping bag and touched our things together because we thought it would mean that we lost our virginities. The other boys sat in a circle around us, egging us on. It was actually a lot like the last scene of Requiem for a Dream. Damn, I forgot about that movie. And that last scene was pretty crazy. New Year's Eve 99 to 2000. I was about 12. I woke up with a sleeping bag full of pee and my hand in a bowl of water. Until the end of the year, they made fun of me for not being Y2K compliant. I had a big birthday party sleepover when I was 11 or 12 and invited a bunch of my friends to spend the night. My mom made me invite the kid from down the road who was in my grade and never really got noticed. He was really small and took a lot of medicine. Anyways, he wet the bed that night and was humiliated by everyone there, including me. I saw him on the bus the following week and felt bad about what happened, and we hung out most weekends until the end of high school. He told me that he had a liver transplant in kindergarten and was facing some serious health threats in the future. And last summer his liver failed and he passed away in hospice care at the age of 25. We lost touch after high school, which is what happened with most of my old friends. He messaged me on Facebook this time last year, wanting to catch up. We chatted for a bit and I told him that I would visit him the next time I was in town. He didn't say anything about his failing health, and I wish he had. I would have made a special trip back home to see him. It's been a year and I've been thinking about him more than usual lately. I miss him a lot. Man, that was a tough read. I always look back on those awkward friends or classmates that I had in high school and wondered if they had any medical or mental health issues. Not something you think about when you're young. Not particularly eventful or spicy, but when I was in middle school, my friend had a birthday sleepover with about 8 or 10 girls. Around 10 p.m., we decided to all sneak out and go TP some boy's house. We go and TP the house. Then we realize we are lost, and we don't know how to get back to her house. So we find the closest main road and just start walking down it. About 8 to 10 middle school girls in their PJs. So naturally, a police officer stopped us and asked what we were doing up so late. Must have been a really awesome cop because we make up some stupid story about looking for a lost cat. We all pile into the car and he takes us back to her house, where we ask him to turn off the lights and let us walk up. This is a true story, but you probably won't believe it is. I was staying the night at a friend's house when I was 8 years old. My foster brother was there too. My friend asks if we want to see a cool trick. We say yes. He lays down on the floor, pulls his pants down and lifts his feet up to his face. He's wearing tighty whities, but what happens next is so crystal clear in my memory. He farts and a small black spot about the size of a dime begins to darken by his butt. Then it gets darker and a hole appears before my eyes. He burnt a hole through his underwear with his fart. See, I told you wouldn't believe me. I didn't believe it either. We told him to do it again, and he did. This time I watched very closely, and after a minute of him getting a fart ready, he lets loose the same quiet fart with the short and the fresh pair of briefs began to darken. My foster brother and I are standing by, watching this feat with scientific scrutiny. The dime-sized spot goes darker and darker, but it doesn't look wet. There's no flame, though it looked like I was watching something burn in the sun. You know how sunlight makes flames nearly invisible? That's how this fart looked by the light of the bedroom lamp. So then the hole forms and all of this takes place in just 4 or 5 seconds. There is a little smoke, though I may have imagined it. The smell is like a fart plus hot rubber. My foster brother and I deliberated and requested a third demonstration. He says he shouldn't because his mom gets mad when he burns holes in his underwear. It's not aliens or ghosts or Bigfoot. It's a young boy with the ability to burn a hole through his cotton underwear with his flatulence. And I swear to God that it's true. Another odd thing was that his brother came in an hour earlier and offered us toothpaste. When we declined, he shrugged and ate a third of the tube in one squeeze. I'm sure I already said this a bunch this video, but bro, what? This one time my high school friend jumped from a third floor and fell into a coma. We were having a guys' night, getting wasted, everything was normal. My friend and his cousin decided to light up some herb. My phone rang and it was my friend's mom. She wanted to talk to him since his phone was out of battery. He was sitting on the couch and I was heading towards him with my phone in my hand. When he saw me heading for him, he freaked the freak out like he saw some kind of demon or monster or something and ran to the balcony and just jumped. He hit his head on a tree going down and fell into a coma and was out for 2 years and a bit. He ended up waking up one day like everything was normal, but he ended up dying a few hours later due to organ failure. His parents blame me since they believe I was the one that handed him the stuff and all that, and that I was the one to blame for inducing the fear that made him jump. My conscience is clear, but what I had to go through to not be seen as responsible, police, family, his and mine, friends and colleagues, was hell. Damn, that's a crazy story, but am I the only person who had a childhood that didn't involve getting wasted? My best friend was a very tomboyish girl, and one time when I was younger, I was sleeping over at her house. This time, 2 of her attractive female cousins happened to be there for the evening as well. I forgot how it came up, but they started talking about how they had never seen a peepee, and were asking me to show them. Now, I was a very shy kid and raised by very conservative parents, so this took a little persuading. But after an hour of them asking, we went into her bathroom, shut the door, and I whipped it out. Man, this is definitely one of those Dear Penthouse stories. When we were about 15, my buddy stole some drinks from his parents and invited me over to drink it with him. When I got there, I had to take a crap and was only gone about 5 minutes, and when I came back, he had drank almost everything. I called him a butthole and drank what was left, which actually got me a little buzz. We decided to watch a movie and I noticed he wasn't looking good. He then puked all over the floor. His mom was downstairs and I didn't want to get caught, so I started cleaning it up. But then he just kept puking, like 3 more piles. I got him to the bathroom and he looked at me and said, "Guess what?" I said what, and then he started peeing his pants and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I got him back to his bed and he barfed again. This was like the 4th or 5th pile. I had only gotten 1 cleaned up so far. And not cleaned up very well, I was kinda wasted. He got out of bed and took his pee-soaked pants and underwear off and was looking for new pants. And that's when I decided I had enough. I wasn't going to deal with the barf and a naked person who was going to do nothing to help the situation. On my way out the door, I told his mom that he wasn't feeling well and left. When I got home, my parents knew that I was wasted and grounded me. His mom blamed everything on me and called my parents to tell them that I got her little angel wasted. Any parents that unironically refer to their kid as a little angel is usually a bad parent from my experience. Slept at a friend's house. Friend had a cat. Woke up with the cat sleeping on my face. I panic. Cat panics because I'm panicking. Cat claws my face. I have hated cats ever since. Screw head sleeping cats. I went to visit my aunt in Cali one year, and well, I crashed out on the futon. Come to find out, said futon was normally the cat's bed. At first, I flattened it out to a normal bed, but I kept waking up with this gigantic fat cat sleeping on me, or snuggled up so close I couldn't help but wake up. So I think, screw this time I just leave it on the couch. Had the weirdest dream I couldn't breathe and woke up in a panic to a 19-pound cat sleeping on my damn head. Well, this is just another reason for me not to like cats.
Doctors of Reddit, what are some of your anti-vax parent stories? Had a kid come in for generic upper respiratory virus, asked mom if he was vaccinated as is routine, and she said no. When I asked why not, her response was, "Well, my boyfriend was vaccinated and he still got meningitis, so they don't even work." I told her that's the same as saying your friend got bruised by a seatbelt in a car accident, so you don't wear them when you drive. We had a 14-year-old female come in for abdominal pain one time. She weighed around 80 pounds, looked sickly, and her mother refused to let her eat anything but a handful of things, and nothing with very much protein at all. She literally had a binder full of articles about how horrible vaccines are, all the bad things they put in food these days, etc. She completely brainwashed this kid, so the kid believed it too. Her labs showed malnutrition, her teeth were horrible. It was just a sad case all around. Not a doctor, but a story I heard stuck with me. The head of pediatrics from a Toronto hospital, I forgot which one, was giving a talk and told a story about how early in her practice, she had a little boy in for his scheduled vaccines and was answering the nervous mother's questions. The mother planned to go ahead with the vaccines, but had heard a lot of anti-vax propaganda, and so she was worried and had lots of questions. While they were talking, but before they administered the vaccines, this poor little kid suffered a grand mal seizure. It was really bad. The kid ended up getting admitted to the hospital and suffered a fairly serious brain injury. It occurred to the pediatrician much later that if that seizure had hit 10 minutes later, or if the appointment had been 10 minutes earlier, nothing would have ever convinced that poor mother that it wasn't the vaccine that caused the seizure. Had a 5 or 6 year old patient who had a super hippie mom. No reason for not vaccinating other than she doesn't want to, despite counseling many times. The kid also had asthma and would consistently come in for exacerbations despite prescribing appropriate controller meds. The amount of exacerbations just didn't make sense. One day, I sent my student to see him first while I called the pharmacy to see if his meds were received. The student came back saying, "I can't get a history from mom. She's literally falling asleep while talking to me." Also, pharmacy said the meds haven't been picked up from the last 3 visits. That was enough for me to call CPS. Mom was on drugs. Living situation? Deplorable. Last I heard, kid was moved to an aunt who caught him up with age-appropriate vaccines. When I was a med student, I had a parent who wanted to do a delayed vaccination schedule. Basically, it means that you get all the same vaccinations, but you pointlessly and foolishly do it over a longer period of time. The mom had read a book promoting this practice that was unfortunately written by an MD. My pediatric attending had zero chill. "Is that book written by Dr. Blank?" "Yes." "Well, you should know I was in the same medical school as Dr. Blank, but I got much better scores than he did." Not a doctor, but my significant other works with children who have autism. She has one parent that constantly tells her she regrets vaccinating her kid. She then asks questions to my significant other about which vaccines are the ones that cause autism, as if it's a big secret. My significant other tells her that autism is predetermined before birth and signs just aren't noticeable until around 2 years of age. She still tries to justify her logic with other anti-vax parent stories from Facebook. My significant other has 2 master's degrees towards this field. It blows my mind how they can still argue with overwhelming facts. Nearly qualified pharmacist here, so obligatory, not a doctor. Our pharmacy offers travel vaccines for people going away to countries with a high likelihood of severe tropical disease. Star parenting goes to the parents who got themselves vaccinated for rabies, but not their 2 elementary school age children. This one just makes no sense to me. You obviously understand the dangers, but don't want to protect your children. In medical school, I saw a kiddo whose parents refused vaccines, and so they were given the vaccine refusal form to sign. This form essentially said that the parents understood that refusing vaccines was against medical advice, that their kiddo could get sick from all those preventable diseases, and that they wouldn't hold the doctor or practice liable for any complications that the kiddo may get from said preventable diseases. This mom pulled out a Sharpie and blacked out the part about the doctor not being liable. The parents thought we'd be cool with them just changing the form just for them, and they wanted the doctor to be held liable for their moronic choice. Of course this didn't work, and they were told to sign the form or they would be discharged from the practice and have to find another. They refused to sign and were told to leave after given a list of other pediatricians in the area. These folks are delusional, thinking you can just alter a legal form like that with a Sharpie. Some people blow my mind. Med school student here. I was getting my hair cut and I was talking to the barber about how more people should get the new meningitis B vaccine since I know a person who got meningitis B and almost died. The desk lady went off about how vaccines are dangerous and pretty much hit every single anti-vax talking point. I explained the actual facts behind vaccines and said that I'm studying medicine. I think I might know what I'm talking about. And then she went off about professors not knowing what they're talking about and that they just teach what they're told to teach speech so that we can all be brainwashed into supporting the big pharmaceutical companies and that my proof was all fabricated by them. Not a doctor, but a nurse and a vaccine advocate. Once had a public argument with a friend from long ago. He argued that by not vaccinating his kids and risking terrible side effects and possible autism, he was placing no one else at risk. However, acknowledging the potential risk to his kids. After attempting to explain the potential risk to others and him failing to understand, I created an analogy which I still use to this day. Imagine if my kids and your kids get into the same car. Both of your kids don't put on seatbelts. Therefore, if there's an accident, there's an increased risk that your kids will die and also harm my children in the process. This seemed to click with him, and he doesn't share his anti-vax propaganda on social media anymore. Thank you. We have someone who can be spoken to and understand the facts and can change their way of thinking. We actually found an adult. Not directly related to my being a doctor, but a mutual friend of mine and my wife's is a chiropractor and anti-vaxxer. Refused to vaccinate her first two kids. I didn't want her or her kids coming anywhere near our place when we had newborns or kids because of the risk her unvaccinated kids placed on my partially vaccinated babies. She got all offended, saying the usual rubbish like, if vaccines work, what do your kids have to fear? And your kids are more risk to mine because they'll be shedding viruses. Her third child was born with cystic fibrosis, which makes them very susceptible to all forms of respiratory and airborne infectious diseases. Suddenly, the whole hypocritical family is vaccinated against everything. Not a doctor, but I worked at a children's hospital in research, at the time as a coordinator. A bunch of us were sitting in our office space talking about medical care of some sort casually. I think maybe flu vaccines, and one coordinator cuts in. Well, I don't know if you've seen the recent research, but there are a number of issues with vaccines that make them unsafe. They're highly correlated with autism. The room got quiet because everyone was polite. One person said, "Oh, I had heard that," I think in an effort to not alienate the girl. I responded, "That's not true," because I couldn't not say that. She said, "Yeah, I'll send you the link." I said, "I think I've probably read the study. It's been rescinded." Then it got more awkward. This was probably in 2017. I just couldn't believe that in 2017, a person whose job it is to understand research at a hospital with children can fall victim to bad research that has not been supported by any reputable source since probably the 90s. I'm not a medical doctor, but a mental health therapist. Went to do a new client intake, and while asking the mother about the kid's medical history, vaccination records, etc., she said he wasn't vaccinated because vaccines cause autism and she didn't want to risk her son getting it. Then when I meet the kid, within 5 seconds of laying eyes on him, I could tell he was autistic. Worst part was that when I told her, she became very upset and started yelling at her husband saying he must have gotten the kid secretly vaccinated, and then immediately ran out of the house and took the kid to the emergency room for testing and just left me and the dad in the living room just kind of staring at each other. Never answered my calls or texts again after that, and I had to get DCF involved. I was a medical student when this happened. My attending pediatrician gave me a heads up about the parent I was about to see and decided it would be best if he came into the room with me. 4-year-old kid came in with a horrible cough and difficulty breathing. It was almost surely pertussis, aka whooping cough. The kid was coughing so bad he vomited on the exam table. He went on to ask about vaccinating her kid, and of course she replied no, even though her son was damn near coughing up his lung right next to her. I think my attending had seen enough and had enough of her not vaccinating her kid and had the following conversation with the kid's mom. Attending: Ms. Blank, I have to ask you, do you trust me as your son's doctor? Mom: of course I do. Attending: well, there's 2 problems here that we need to address. 1, you either think you're more knowledgeable than me when it comes to medicine, and if that's the case, I should no longer be your son's doctor. Or you don't trust me as a physician, and in that case, I shouldn't be your son's doctor. Mom just sits there with a blank stare on her face. Attending: will you please reconsider giving your son a vaccine? Mom: no. My attending obviously treated her kid, but after this whole ordeal resolved, he dropped her and her son as patients and referred them to another pediatrician. He'd had enough of her. I respected the heck out of him after he pulled this move. Pediatric resident here in the US. Our continuity clinic accepts everyone, including those kicked out of previous practices for anti-vaccination beliefs, which is a bit frustrating at times. Really, it's a mixed bag of how we handle these patients. Ostracizing the parents is only going to build further barriers between provider and kid, so that doesn't help. Frankly, what has worked best in my experience is to try to understand where the families are coming from, explicitly asking their thoughts on vaccines to let them voice their misunderstandings. Oftentimes, this is the first time they've been allowed to talk about their questions and concerns regarding vaccines with a trained MD who doesn't belittle them. Most frustratingly, it takes patience and time. Assessing where they're regarding change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, etc., helps determine where we are for vaccinating them today, in a month, or in a few months. One thing that I do draw the line on is to make sure that we see these kids more frequently than normal children, as they are at higher risks for illnesses because they're not vaccinated. No room for negotiation on that point. This helps twofold. First, it helps build rapport with the family, but also secondly, if they decide to take a delayed schedule, which is still not ideal but better than no vaccines, we can eventually catch them up to speed with their vaccinations by frequent return visits. Interestingly, it's always the yoga pants Karen types that are the anti-vaxxer, or pro-measles as I've been calling them lately, rather than the less educated single moms on welfare or the recent immigrants that speak no English. Ultimately, we're the kids' docs and their advocates, and are most effective when we ally with the families, or better put, get the families to ally with us, and do have to be stern after a certain point. It's a mix of being stern but also compromising to work with families to provide their kids with as much and the best care as possible. I really like this poster's point of view, and I think it's really interesting to hear it coming from someone who has to deal with these kind of people on a frequent basis in medical circumstances, but has found the best way to have the interaction without having the child suffer, which at the end of the day is the only one who would. I was a med student at the time on an OB rotation, was waiting for my attending when he came in and just basically grunted and lightly tapped his head off the keyboard before beginning to click away. I asked what happened and he explained that the couple that was here for a C-section were refusing vaccines. Now, vaccinating is a topic I have strong feelings about, so I asked him if I could go talk to them. He allowed it. I went in and introduced myself and said I had heard they did not want to vaccinate their soon-to-be-born and wanted to talk about any questions or misinformation they may have heard. Quick picture, young white couple, the father wearing a tank top, backwards hat, with a tear tattoo under his eye. You get the idea. He explains, "My buddy out east, yo, he has kids and they got vaccinated and now they slow. I got other kids and they ain't vaccinated and they ain't slow. That's proof right there." I knew what I was getting myself into, but continued the conversation trying to let them know the truth about vaccinating. About 10 minutes later of me hitting my head against the wall, I realized there's no way I'm changing their minds. So I take my leave. I later come back to help bring the mother in to prep her for the C-section. It was myself and one nurse when the father stops us and says we can't take his wife anywhere without him. I explained it's a sterile environment and once we get prepped, I'll come out and bring him in. He still refuses and is getting upset at this point, which is when he drops the bomb. "If I'm not there, that's when you're gonna put the chip in her." I said, "Pardon?" He went on to explain he thought we were going to insert a chip that would control his wife or keep tabs on her or something along those lines. Ended up convincing him to wait 10 minutes and I would come get him. It took everything in my power not to write on her arm, "Insert chip here." During the surgery, my attending actually ended up convincing him to allow certain vaccinations. I can't remember which, but it was a small victory. I feel like Family Guy said it best. There's an episode where Lois and Peter kidnap this child to get him to a hospital because the parents believe prayer will heal their kid. So Lois eventually has to confront them and says something like, maybe the vaccines and medicines are God's answers to your prayers. So why keep praying if you're just going to wipe yourself with his reply? When I was a medical student, I had a 5-year-old patient who looked and acted like a 2-year-old. Failure to thrive. His mother was super weird. She shaved the sides of his head, something like a marine cut, but kept his hair long in the back. She refused to vaccinate him or even feed him certain foods. Her sister and her husband were trying to get custody of the child because his mother was weird and didn't take care of him properly. I suspect she was paranoid. She would literally fight and call you names if you attempt to suggest to put the kid on a proper hospital diet. She wanted to inspect the food first and make sure he eats only certain things. Long story short, the attending called county and they took the child away from her. Not a doctor yet, but a med school student. A fellow student of mine is very happy about not being completely vaccinated. She's also happy that our country, Germany, is still a free country considering vaccination, since she believes that they don't really work. At this point, I'd like to remind you that she is a medical student, and at least once a year, we have to have a medical checkup to make sure our mandatory vaccinations are in order, simply because we're studying and working at a hospital with a lot of immunocompromised patients. Anyway, she was happy to inform me that she only got the vaccinations that were absolutely mandatory. So she got no tetanus shot, for example, and believes she will never get tetanus, simply because she doesn't want to and she believes that's enough, since our minds are so capable of healing our bodies if we let them go free. For example, by using hallucinogenic drugs. Luckily, that can only harm her and no others. I'm really not a bad person, but I kind of hope she cuts her foot on a rusty nail and gets a little bit of tetanus. Nothing that will kill her or have any lasting effect on her, besides maybe convincing her that vaccines work. I really don't want her to become a doctor. I had a kid come in that was super sick, 3 years old and in septic shock. He had the flu and another compounded viral infection, or maybe pertussis. Heart rate was close to 200, respiratory rate in the 50s, blood pressure in the 70s. The kid was so dry that we could barely get IVs into him, and I almost had to drill an IO. We dumped a ton of fluids into him, started him on vasopressors, and transferred him to the local children's hospital. I asked the mom if he was vaccinated, and she said, "No, vaccines have really bad side effects. They'll make you sick." I explained to her that not getting the vaccine had made her kid 10 times sicker than he ever would have been from any mild vaccine reaction. She told me I was a moron and that I obviously have no clue what I'm talking about, and that's the reason her kid was getting transferred. She also told me that recommending she vaccinate her kids was racist. Yeah, the end of that one is kind of a big question mark. We want everyone to be vaccinated. That's kind of the point. Race is completely irrelevant. Bringing race into this conversation is really weird. Got another one for you here. Same old story. Their pseudoscience gets them Facebook likes, but as soon as something arises, they are straight to the local emergency department demanding they be fixed. Demanding the best treatment. Demanding all the magic equipment is brought out to fix and save their kids' lives. But vaccines and big pharma are bad. Very bad. But please save my kid's life. I trust you now to fix the problem, but if you try to prevent the problem in the first place, you're a stupid doctor who works for big pharma. It's so stupid. I have the opposite of what you're expecting to hear, I assume. As a medical student, I went to see a young child less than 1 year old in the outpatient clinic before the attending. The child was due for vaccines, and I talked to the parents about getting them on that day. The parents said they had reservations about them, so I talked to them about their reservations. We talked about all of the things they'd read on the internet and walked through each point one by one. One of the benefits of being the medical student is you have nothing but time. I explained how vaccines are made and how they work. They don't have the mercury preservative they once did. Some vaccines are live but attenuated, and others are immunogenic sequences bound to a protein. And why we get so many so early. That's when you're most likely to be affected by these diseases. They were concerned about the effects of so many vaccines at once. This is a common concern, but we challenge your system less with a vaccine than you see walking around in the world every day. And they asked about them making the child sick. Not possible with anything but a live vaccine, and that's why those are attenuated. There's such a small dose that a non-immunocompromised individual should have no problem with them, even though you might feel a little sick because we activate your immune system, and that's how you feel when that happens. The whole discussion probably took about a half an hour, and then they decided to go forward with the vaccines. As it turns out, most people are just scared, and who can blame them? With all the misinformation in the world, it's easy to see how parents get to that point. But they're also human, and when you sit down and talk to them like the people that they are, intelligent and able to understand your points, they respond in a positive way. It's one of the moments in medical school that I reflect on frequently, especially when things are tough and I feel like being impatient with people. Again, we have another doctor who's being very understanding of the parent's point of view. It's true that there's so much misinformation out in the world right now, and not just about vaccines. It's easy to get confused and get a little worried, especially when it comes to the health of your newborn. But like the poster said, you talk to them like adults and they will respond like adults. I had a mother bring in her child to see me as a new patient. When I saw that he wasn't vaccinated, I asked my nurse why not, and she told me that the mother had a religious exemption. When I entered the room, I asked the mom what the religious exemption was, and she said, "Oh, well, when he was a baby, he had a rash from the hepatitis B vaccine." I kindly told her that I couldn't care for her child because he was not only a risk to my staff, myself, but also to other patients in my office. She went off on me and ranted about, "I can't believe that every doctor's office I call refuses to treat my son because he's not vaccinated, and that the only doctor in the country that will see him can't see him for almost 2 months." I kindly stopped her and said, if I was one of the few that refused to treat your child, I would understand your frustration. But don't you think there's a message that not a single doctor in the entire county, save for one doctor who did some pretty questionable practices, think essential oils and stuff, will treat your kid? Then maybe there's a valid reason behind it? Yeah, she definitely wasn't happy when she left. I had a 76-year-old anti-vax patient the other day, although not really a parent story. Funnily enough, she came in for her flu vax and the conversation went like this while I was preparing to give it to her. "They're injecting too many chemicals into people nowadays." Me, confused, "Do you want your flu shot then?" Her, "No, I mean the children. Back in my day, we all had measles and got over it. I think it's better for the body's immune system to handle it." Me, actually, rates of deaths and complications from measles were much higher in the past compared to complications of vaccines. There's actually this video that explains it quite well, referring to the recent Kurzgesagt video. Her, "I despise those things. Computers, televisions, I won't watch it." Me, "Okay, let's just agree to disagree. Just thought it was funny how she obviously wanted protection from the flu instead of letting her immune system do the job while criticizing childhood vaccinations, when kids obviously lack a fully developed immune system. Also, she obviously wasn't getting her info from any up-to-date sources given her disdain of TV and computers, but I guess her gut feeling trumps my medical knowledge.
What does your family do that you didn't realize was bizarre until later on in life? Okay, so my mom was a pretty crappy parent. She didn't really teach me a lot and I was left alone most of the time. Most of the things I learned were from my cousin because she paid her to watch me while she would go to work or be messed up somewhere. I don't know. Never took me to an amusement park or anything. It was all my cousin. Anyway, as a kid, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and that was because my mom didn't buy me Jack as a kid. It was always my cousin getting me things and taking me places, and for Christmas I would always get really good things. Like I would get a PS2, games I really wanted, a stereo, etc. $700 a month disability money because I'm disabled. Anyways, for those reasons, I firmly believed in Santa Claus, and I remember vividly kids in middle school telling me it was my mom, and I 100% did not believe in them to the point I started crying about it. All the cool gifts were from Santa as well, by the way. All the gifts my mom would get me were socks, shirts, etc. My mom also reinforced that Santa was real. Hell, I believed in the Tooth Fairy for the same reason, since I'd get $5 for every tooth I lost. Fast forward to just recently-ish, I'm 26, and I find out all the gifts from Santa were from my cousin and her mom. They would give my mom gifts for me every year, and every year my mom would take off the name tag and replace them with Santa. I even remember her telling me how specifically my cousin and aunt didn't get me any Christmas gifts while growing up. I feel like she felt inferior or something because my cousin cared more about me and got me expensive gifts. When I grew out of the Santa thing, I actually believed my mom got me all those gifts and was using my disability money for them. Cause like every year I'd get a ton of good stuff. It now makes a lot more sense. My cousin always knew what stuff I liked cause we liked the same things. I even remember the year I got a GameCube and how whenever I'd go to her house I'd want to play her GameCube to play Harvest Moon. And that Christmas, what game did I get with my GameCube? Harvest Moon. I never told my mom I wanted Harvest Moon. It was only my cousin that knew, so I fervently believed it was Santa that knew I wanted it through magic or whatever. Really bad that my mom did that to my cousin and her mom, but this isn't even the worst thing she'd done. I could write a book about how terrible a person she is. So I wouldn't have said the mom was that bad until they mentioned that they were actively hiding the cousin and aunt were buying them gifts. That bit was like, ooh, okay, maybe she is that bad. Because not buying luxury items isn't a terrible thing. That's what it is. It's a luxury. It's not a basic necessity or anything like that. Because basic necessities, when you get older, you realize that's what matters. When you're a kid, you're all about the PlayStation 2. When you're adult, you're like, oh yes, socks and underwear for Christmas. Ooh. Maybe more context is needed, but yeah, it does sound like they kind of sucked.
To keep me from watching too much TV, my dad told me that we had a 1 hour limit on our TV viewing. As in, we paid for 1 hour of TV per day, and any more than that we would be charged extra for. Like AOL back in the day. When I started going to friends' houses where the TV was always on, I got a bit suspicious, but I just figured they had more money than we did. Eventually, after watching TV for hours and hours with one friend, I asked her how much TV they paid for, and she just looked at me like I was nuts. So I guess lying to your kids because it's easier than getting into a fight over a rule you want to enforce is the bizarre thing my family did.
I'm of two minds on this one. 1, obviously it's not good to lie to your children. 2, I don't blame them if they wanted them to get away from the TV and go out and be active and stuff, because a prevalent issue nowadays is people having too much screen time. Like, I see some parents out and about, they hand their babies mobile phones and stuff. It's like, what the hell? I understand if they've got like learning programs on there or things specifically for them, but I just don't think it's very good for their development. I don't think kids should be raised on technology. I only got a phone. Granted, I got a phone in like 2006. I got a little flip Nokia. It was a basic phone, had nothing else. That's all I used it for. But now I just feel like phones and tablets and stuff, when they just hand it off to their kids, it just feels like they're trying to distract them and not engage with them or teach them anything themselves. You're supposed to be there for them. You're supposed to engage with your kids, for God's sake. Anyway, that's just a little rant I've got, I guess.
Having no shame being nude. At least in America, that's weird. Granted, my father was not wandering the house nude as he has all daughters, but my mother, 0 craps given. My sister, mom, and I just have no shame. I'm eating breakfast. Mom wanders into the kitchen naked to do her neti pot thing. I'm trying to take a bath. Here's mom or sissy trying to have a conversation. Walk into mom's bathroom. Literally every door leading there wide open. Mom taking a bath. Stop and have a chat. Same with my sister. I've had so many damn bathtub conversations with my sister and mom. Also, my mom's total nonchalance about being naked around my best girlfriend. No, they weren't uncomfortable. She asked or warned them. She just wanders around naked sometimes. So now I'm just always naked in my own home. Blinds open or not, I literally just don't even notice. Being nude is just my inherent natural state.
I mean, TMI, but if absolutely no one is around and whatnot, yeah, it's pretty nice to walk around in the nude, but like when there's company about, it's like, well, it's a bit weird, yeah, like that's my standard, you know, I'm not going to enforce my standard on people, but, you know, kind of weird.
Yeah, my boyfriend found this super weird and gets upset that I don't close the bathroom door all the way. He had 4 cats and my parents had 4 daughters with 1 bathroom. Privacy while you pooped was just not happening. I'm almost 30 and still find myself wandering into the bathroom while my mom's doing her thing when I visit to chat. It's just our normal. Also, my dad never wore pants when he was home. Tidy whities and a shirt is how most of my friends met him. I remember one of my sisters pleading with him to put on pants because her boyfriend was coming over, and he was just like, I pay the mortgage. I don't have to wear pants, which has become my life creed.
You heard the man, love. He pays the mortgage. Now, I agree, though. When company is coming around, just put some freaking trousers on. Here's the thing. Here's the rule. Shirtless, all right. Pantsless, nah, that's a no-go. Not when company's about.
When I was younger, my whole extended family, except the ones in Germany, would share a farm together and go there on the weekends. We would spend the whole day weeding, raking, other chores, and goofing off outside. And at night, we would eat only potatoes and gravy, and the men would drink beer. After that, all of us kids would go into the living room and watch VHS tapes of adult movies that were probably too inappropriate for us to be watching at that age. We would do this till 11 while the adults talked and played games, and then we would all go home as my grandmother and grandfather were the only people who lived there permanently. That farm has been in the family for a long time.
That sounds like a damn good time, a hootenanny even. I'd love to go to a farm and, like, you know, get drunk with my relatives, talk, play games, drink beer. I mean, maybe not beer, I'm more of a cocktails guy and all that. Or watch inappropriate movies and stuff. Like, I don't know if he meant, like, you know, adult movies or he meant more like just inappropriate films for kids like Final Destination, or as I would be watching when I was like, I don't know, 10 years old, From Dusk Till Dawn. That's a great film. I freaking love that movie.
My mom would let me and my brother run around naked for about 10 minutes before our bath, around ages 2 to 3, so we wouldn't want to take our clothes off in front of company, because she read that some toddlers do that, but creating a time to be naked stopped it, I guess, and she didn't want to risk it or something. And she also would give us our popsicles in the bath or shower until we were about 4, so she could just hose us down and we didn't get everything sticky while eating.
I don't actually blame her. Lollipops, anything like a popsicle or a lollipop, you gotta be careful with kids. I know until the age of like 5 or 6, I think, I could not be trusted with a lollipop. I would get sticky. I'd be holding it at arm's length, and then next thing I know, what the hell's going on with my hair? Why is my hair sticky? I didn't put it anywhere near my head. My hair's all sticky, and my mom and my brother would be all, get your rollers out, Edna, because I had long, gorgeous blonde locks, and they'd get all curled up and sticky and horrible. I'd hate it. I'd cry even. When we watched movies, we would discuss what was happening, what we thought of the characters, or just random things that we thought of during the movie. When I would watch movies at my friend's house, they found this very annoying, and I didn't realize people just sat in complete silence for 2 hours. I have since broken the habit, mostly, but when I meet up with my family, it's the same as it used to be. I also do this with very specific people that are down for it. I have a friend who I watch a movie and like a bunch of anime with on weekends and stuff. When we have the time, we get together, we just watch random stuff. We've been watching like Back to the Future. We recently watched Homeward Bound, which was a lot less sad than I thought it was gonna be. He wanted to make me cry. And we just comment on things, make jokes every now and then. Like, it's just a thing that we do. Otherwise, though, I am perfectly fine to sit in complete silence while watching a film. Cult stuff. I didn't know it was a cult until I became an adult, grew up in a Christian group. They had their own church and school. I wasn't allowed to talk to people from outside both church and school my whole childhood. Even neighbors I got in trouble for. This is the kind that teaches you homosexuality is evil, Pope is evil, Obama is evil, Trump is evil. Hell, I got a detention for using female hair products because it was gay, and that was 2011 in Canada. It was crappy, I guess, but the time I tried to self-delete with a bottle of whiskey, my parents' response was to ground me for life because I went and partied. I told them why I did it. They sent an elder from the church to talk to me, and the grounding remained. They had their own business too, so at 16 you'd work and get paid normally for the church folk. Being an adult, I left, but I had no clue just how sheltered it is, and how crazy sheltered I was as a kid. 20 is when I got away, and it was like this magical adventure world where nothing was like it was supposed to be. That sounds like utter hell, and although this was about Christianity specifically, I want people to remember no matter what part of the political or religious spectrum you are on and what you believe in, if you are too dedicated to a specific ideology in which you put it before the people around you, the people that care and love you, you're going to taint, corrupt, and hurt those around you, and probably just ruin any impression that people have of you and what you believe in, and that goes for everyone.
Not brushing teeth. We were never taught to actually make a habit out of brushing our teeth growing up. Our parents didn't either. We used to get shown those fun educational videos in school when we were kids. The ones with the big cartoon toothbrush who tells you how to brush your teeth. But I never actually took them seriously. I thought toothbrushing was just something people on TV did, not an actual real thing, until my first sleepover with a friend around 5th or 6th grade. We were getting ready to go to sleep and I looked at her like she was crazy because she was actually brushing her teeth. And she looked at me like I was crazy because I wasn't brushing my teeth. I didn't have many sleepovers as a kid, so I just put it down to sleepover weirdness and carried on not brushing my teeth until I started getting tooth pains in my late teens. Went to the dentist. He asked when the last time I'd brushed was, and I swear he nearly fainted when I answered. Safe to say I brush my teeth now, but a less gross one, maths. When my siblings and I were little, our mother used to make up maths worksheets for us to do. She'd sit down
and handwrite a bunch of real simple, we were kids, maths questions down. Give us a sheet each and just let us work through them. It wasn't forced or anything, though. We never had to do it, but we wanted to. It was like a game to us. We'd ask her to do it for us. I didn't realize that not everyone's mother would do that or read to them each night before bed. Even my first teacher commented on how much further along my reading was than the other kids when I first started school. I thought this stuff was standard until I started talking to other kids about it and realized nobody else in my class did it.
Save for the disregard for oral hygiene, which, by the way, kids, seriously, brush your teeth every day. Make sure your mouth is clean and healthy. It is important. You can get sick, and I think in some cases you can even die if your mouth is, really badly kept. But that's the extreme. And on the other hand, though, these parents are clearly engaged in wanting to teach their kids stuff. I mean, that's a problem that I've talked about before, I think. A lot of parents just aren't engaging with their kids and actively trying to teach them stuff. I have a close personal friend who was a primary school teacher for a while, and she told me about a couple kids who didn't have, major learning difficulties or anything, just didn't know how to wipe their butts because their parents just didn't bother to teach them how. Neglect is a form of abuse, people.
When I was a kid, we opened all of our Christmas presents after dinner on Christmas night. All of my friends opened them on Christmas morning or sometimes even Christmas Eve. But we waited with all of the family, including grandparents and aunts and uncles and the whole damn fam. Dinner was eaten, dishes were done, drinks were served, and we all sat together for several hours and opened Christmas presents. I don't do that with my own family now, but I do kind of miss the tradition.
I frickin' love Christmas. Christmas frickin' rocks. I'm not fanatical about it, but I like it. I love the atmosphere, the snow, the goodwill, and cartoon Christmas specials back in the day absolutely rocked. My mother is a member of the Slavic pagan cult. In my childhood, there was nothing strange for me in bloody sacrifices for different gods. It was a bit of a holiday for me. In the courtyard, we had an altar where mother often performed rituals. However, in the end, my father could not stand this pizdец and broke up with her. But now I can easily write fantasy books on the knowledge that I received in my childhood. I even tried in Russian. I am from Russia, but I am not very good at composing stories. And no, it had no effect on my mind. Unless I'm not so worried because of blood, death, etc. I am not cruel. I have quite normal relations with people around me. Now I am 22 and I am IT student, and of course I am not pagan. By itself, the sacrifices were hens, pigs, and other livestock animals. Most often they were not for the fire god, so most often this event ended in a feast. I actually once went on a date with a woman who claimed to be a practicing pagan. I mean, paganism itself is an umbrella term for a few different things that have either been discarded or forgotten, and people don't really talk about that much openly, but I don't know, the whole concept seems kind of cool to me. All different gods, respecting nature and all that. I don't know if it's bizarre, but my parents had arguments in front of us when we were kids. Not knocked out, drag out fights or anything, but they disagree and hash it out verbally, sometimes loudly. Now that I'm married and have grown-up friends and such, almost my entire social circle never saw their parents argue or fight. I'll be honest, I've witnessed some awful arguments and fights between my parents, but I do know someone whose parents literally never argued in front of them, and they are simultaneously the least confrontational but also most dangerous person I know, because they literally study the way of the blade. They do Bushido stuff. The man can roll into a stance while holding a samurai sword and slash that thing out smooth as butter. I have held his katanas. They are authentic and sharp, and I also had the honor of attending his daughter's christening very recently. Confrontation is an inevitable thing, people. You should be prepared for it in all manners, whether it just be an argument or whether it be someone actually trying to cause real physical harm to you. Because some people just freak out over the most mundane things, and you know what, maybe that's part of the reason why. Your parents didn't argue enough in front of you. It's a regular thing that happens. Arguments can sometimes be the way that you can solve problems. I had a less than traditional upbringing due to my 2 juvenile delinquent older sisters, but despite all of that, my family has always been very full of love. Every goodbye or goodnight was always accompanied by, I love you. It wasn't until I started dating my now husband that I realized not all families do this. He'd get off the phone with his mom and just say, bye, and I'd be shocked at the rudeness of it. He's adopted the habit with me now because I've never stopped. I've always felt loved by my parents no matter what was going on because of the constant effort to remind ourselves that we love one another.
Solidarity, sister. I literally do the same thing with my family and even my very close friends. I believe that anything can happen. I could be snatched from this existence at any point for any reason. So I let those around me who I truly, deeply care about know that I love them, even if it might be a bit embarrassing for them when I say it to them in public.
I just realized today, probably not that strange, but my family would go to the movie theater when we knew it was going to be a rainy or stormy day. We would go see a movie and then look at the weather, and if it was still bad outside, we would just hop into another movie. I never knew it was wrong or anything. I was like, sweet, we get to watch more movies. Never got caught as I remember, but I'd never be bold enough to do it now.
Sneaking into a film isn't the worst thing I can think of, but I have never done it and I don't intend to because I have a lot more respect for my local establishments. Because the fact of the matter is, people, if these places don't make money, then they just disappear. And then suddenly, oh, you live in a food desert. Or, oh, there's nothing to do. And then a big shadowy corporation buy up the property for a cheap price and then build houses. They own the houses, price up those houses. And people can't actually afford to buy them and then they're renting those places forever. Men were considered inferior and violent. We weren't allowed anything resembling a weapon, including army men. Weren't allowed violent toys, no sugar, very rarely allowed time with friends. Most mornings I'd wake up to find I was grounded for one reason or another, along with my brother, and we were locked in the room all day. Food and water twice a day, bathroom at the same time. No blinds or curtains, no beds. We were allowed a mattress. If we were allowed outside, it was to do chores, usually the more physical ones like weeding or picking up rocks. I still have panic attacks if I feel trapped. When I stayed in the hospital overnight last year, they were kind enough to help me walk around so I wouldn't stress out, but it was a bloody awful experience. Anyway, I assumed all families were absolutely horrible and this was pretty normal until I actually spoke to people about it. My grandmother raised me and I keep this light orb thing I made of her ashes as a nightlight to remind myself that even the worst pieces of crap can be useful. I defer back to my comment earlier about how extreme ideologies can really corrupt, taint, and harm people around you. But always remember that you have the opportunity to be better than the people that hurt you.
Happy one. My parents combined their last names without a hyphen, so we have a unique name. It took me a while to realize other people existed with my friends' same first and last names. It really weirded me out. Mildly happy one. I was raised not to argue with my siblings, and it was forbidden not to get along. So we got along. Not as happy. I thought everyone's parents would just take random bins of their precious things, including clothes, pajamas, toys, books, etc., and put them in the basement and never give them back, even when they said they would. Very unhappy. I thought everyone's parents would scream at them if they ever asked why they were doing something or ever said anything the parent didn't 100% agree with. Maybe everyone does do this, though.
Well, that certainly went from happy to sad to me lamenting that some people just should not be parents. Obviously, this person's parental figure lacked any and all emotional maturity where they couldn't even handle their child disagreeing with them.
I grew up in a Christian subculture known as Mennonite. A lot of the ways I was raised would be considered bizarre. No TV, no internet until I was in 6th grade at least. No going to the movies, bowling alleys, or skating rinks. I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. And no other worldly styles such as Christian rock, rap, etc. My mom wears long skirts and a covering on her head and is often mistaken for either a Catholic nun or Amish. We had a whole laundry list of do's and don'ts. At the time, it didn't seem bizarre because that's all I knew. Of course, I knew others were different, but that was of little consequence to me. That said, I value my upbringing. I was raised with a strong work ethic and a fantastic moral foundation, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I like that this guy takes the bad with the good. He doesn't directly deride the Mennonite thing or even say that he doesn't live by it anymore. It's kind of up in the air. He doesn't say. But I think that this kind of calls back to the guy who doesn't brush his teeth, but yet his parents still taught him maths and English and stuff where they're clearly engaged with him on a level where it's like, yeah, those parents are good people, and yet they have a blind spot. They just didn't care about oral hygiene. But it doesn't mean they don't love them or anything like that. I mean, kids, here's the thing. You're never going to have all the answers in the future. There's always going to be a blind spot, or you're going to mess up or something, and that's the way parents are. It's just a fact. My mom raised me on her own. I remember realizing that, wow, my mom doesn't actually know what she's doing. She's just doing her best. And I've turned out okay.
When my little brothers were babies and they needed to poop, my mother would pick them up, plop them on her lap, and hold them over the trash can in the kitchen. So she'd just be sitting on a chair with the trash can in front of her, letting their turds plop out their butts in full view of us. It's a lot easier than cleaning a dirty diaper later. The weird part is doing this even when I had friends over. They don't come over anymore.
Maybe it's because you sound like a little gremlin man. No, kind of gross, but I understand the logic. I just, learned to wrap a nappy, though. There's a road tunnel about 20 minutes from where we grew up. It's about 2,000 yards long, and when we drove through it, we all had to hold our breath. No other tunnels, just that one. I thought everyone did it and was surprised when I found out they didn't. Also, if you bring someone a present from your holiday, it's referred to as a rabbit. Again, I was surprised that it's just our family that does that. This isn't a family thing, but when I was a kid, I used to hold my breath whenever I saw like a character in a cartoon or a video game underwater and try to hold it for as long as they're underwater, because my logic was, if I can hold my breath for as long as they can underwater when I'm in this situation, I'll be fine because I've been practicing. No, it doesn't work like that. Really doesn't work like that. I remember doing it while watching the Tarzan cartoon. I think it was the episode where Clayton's sister comes and wants revenge for her dead brother.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.